Greetings, boils and ghouls, goblins and ghosts. You're tuning into To Ghoul for School, the podcast, a death-style podcast for the morbidly inclined. Class is in session. I'm your ghoulish hostess, Jocelyn Wen, a.k.a. Glamour Ghoul Beauty School. I'm an actress, I have my BA in psychology, and I'm a purveyor of all things dark and spooky. We have a very special guest this week on To Ghoul for School, the podcast. He is the frontman of the band Vision Video, as well as being the internet's goth dad. I am pleased to welcome the one and only Dusty Gannon. He talks about life as a kid in Georgia. He really opens up to me about his experiences as a firefighter, paramedic, as well as being a veteran. And we also talk music and horror films and life and mental illness and contending with that, and how art can be a great way to transcend through that. So super excited to welcome Dusty Gannon onto the show. And I'm really glad you've come on the podcast. It's
totally
awesome to have you on To Ghoul for School, the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm very honored to have you.
Hell yeah.
When you were a kid, did you ever expect you would be like in a goth rock band and living the spooky life?
No, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have been surprised that I ended up doing it, but I never thought it would be like my job effectively. You know what I mean? Like I didn't, you don't ever imagine that that's like a thing that can happen, because it's extraordinarily rare that you can even get to the level. And we're not like living lavishly, but like it's
you're
hard.
Touring, man.
Yeah. It's a privilege. So.
What did you imagine you'd be when you were just like a wee little trash goblin?
Well, my dad was in the Army, so like,
oh, cool.
You know, I kind of figured that I would do that, and I did for a long time. But, you know, I didn't really, like when I was a teenager is when I found all this stuff. So, I mean, that's when it kind of became a reality for me of like, oh, this is like something that I would daydream about and be like, oh, like that would be a cool thing to do one day. But you don't ever conceptualize like that it's literally possible. And it just takes a lot of work.
Absolutely. Yeah, my husband was in the Army Reserve for 12 years. He retired like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally. Yeah, commend you and understand what a lot of that entails. Yeah. So you were saying you're not classically trained or anything, but like how did you start creating music? Was it your voice, like singing, that got you in, or like instruments?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I kind of started out with music, with guitar when I was around like 9 or 10. My parents bought me this like really cheap acoustic guitar, and they kind of put me into one lesson, and I was so ADHD when I was a kid that I just like could not focus. But I really enjoyed it, like playing the instrument. I just couldn't handle the like classical instruction because it was like and when you're a kid that young that is like super unable to focus, you know, sitting down and like pressing your fingers down is painful, and you don't see the immediate results. You don't like, it takes a couple weeks to really start feeling like you're doing anything with guitar. And I was just like, I don't know if that's for me. So I kind of stopped. But then like moving forward into my teenage years is when I really found music, and I lived in like very rural Georgia. There was nothing to do. I had no ability to get out of this tiny little town of like 200 people, like I think 30 minutes away from anything of any significance. And so music for me was like sort of my escape and my outlet of that like feeling of isolation, of being kind of especially being a weird kid out in rural Georgia. So I listened to a lot of music, and it kind of pushed me to learn like my own pathway and journey into music. And I remember buying like a Roland synthesizer, like a pretty nice one, with birthday money one year when I was in middle school, and like just kind of messing around with that synthesizer, making my own synth patches, like making my own modulated sounds, like using LFOs and all this like weird wavelength and frequency modulation to create new sound was like kind of mind blowing to me because, you know, like that's like one of my favorite aspects of like punk and post-punk music is that a lot of the musicians from the late 70s and early 80s didn't know what they were doing. They weren't classically trained. They kind of learned on the fly on their own, and they were just sort of emulating stuff at first. They were just playing like the Beatles or Rolling Stones or New York Dolls or whatever, but then it turned into something as they just put their hands on instruments for long enough to learn like how to make and manipulate sound that they wanted to achieve. And I think that that's like a strength that I have for like, I really wish I had stayed on the track of learning the theory and the, you know, the scale structures and all this stuff, because I would be able to do what I hear in my head easier and not spend so much time just like messing around. But, you know, like one of the things I always say about like the way that I learned is like, I never learned the rules, so I break all of them. And that really helped me develop like my own sense of style. And I think that it's hard to figure out like what your style is when you're playing an instrument. You know, it's hard to develop your own identity around something, especially where music is so like oversaturated and everything has kind of been done in a way. So for me, it was like, you know, just kind of like messing around in that room. Like I still feel the same way as I did, you know, now at my advanced age of 36 as I did at the age of 16, you know, sitting in a room with a keyboard or with a guitar and just experimenting and finding like that right tone of voice through that instrumentation. So that's, you know, that's kind of how I figured it out. And I still learn every day. Like I learn some new little thing, little trick or technique. And now I am getting more into the theory and the advanced technique where I'm actually learning in a more formative classical way. And it's like, I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes, but I'm starting to get it. And it's really cool because I see like some of the stuff that I've done in the past. I'm like, oh, that's actually like kind of clever. I just accidentally did that. So I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the time you'll just stumble on to the way it's done without really realizing it. And there's a lot of brilliance, I think, in just being able to play, like literally,
Right.
like a childlike play and discovery. So I think
Right.
that's what you're onto there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's any less merit in that, like
Yeah.
honestly. And then you can
Right.
just, you know, learn different methods basically, and you pick what works best. And
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, the way that you got into it with kind of experimenting is the better way, and sometimes it is the theory that works better, you know.
Right.
that's
Right.
that's so cool though. And then how did you get into singing? Like it seems like it just kind of came part and parcel, or
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of coincided with a lot of that. Like, to my parents' chagrin, I used to like sing along to like Bauhaus, especially. It was like, I remember just Peter Murphy's voice was so striking to me. But like, you know, Morrissey of the Smiths and Ian Curtis and just all those like really iconic, you know, Susie Sue, like all the greats of kind of goth rock history. Really resonated with me, and so I would just sing along like for hours. Because again, nothing to do, and I that is not a like exaggeration. I mean, there was nothing to
Dang.
do for a kid that's into not like, you know, I did like kind of redneck stuff with my friends there because that was what was available. You know, we would go hunting or go, you know, walk around in the woods and just do like kind of, you know, we'd go ride four-wheeler, like just regular kind of country kid stuff. But I always felt like that wasn't, it was fun, I guess, but it wasn't for me exactly. So I had to have these other weird things that I did. So, you know, singing for me was like, you know, when I would get frustrated with instrumentation because of my inability to wrap my head around, you know, the theory or whatever, you know, your voice is your voice. It's just something that's innate, and it's so immediately correctable to me. So if I'm like not hitting a note, I can find that pitch. Like I have really good pitch correction, and I have really good control over my voice. But that also took, you know, years of developing. Again, I'm sorry to my parents for having to listen to that, because you know, when you're a kid, like you don't realize like spatial awareness. You don't realize like how loud you're singing in your bedroom while your parents are like in the living room next door, and I'm sure they were just like, Dude, if I have to listen to Bela Lugosi's Dead one more time, I'm gonna like kill this kid. We'll make our own goth song about it, I guess. But yeah,
Killed our son to Bela Lugosi's
yeah,
dead. Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, it's annoying to everyone else but you because you're the one
right,
doing it.
right, right.
No, I
And
definitely
16-year-olds don't care. Right?
yeah.
They definitely like whatever. So
Right. And you're just like in your own world, like trying to, escape and yeah, just find your own little uh, cave of darkness, really. Like,
yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
the mundanity of life. Like, I definitely did it. I definitely, like, just, played around in my room, singing, dancing, and stuff. And yeah, I realized that how many times I would listen to something over and over again.
Yes,
I'm kind of more
yes.
conscious of it now with my husband. I'm like, I really want to learn this really cool, like, I don't know, almost rappy segment of a song, but I'm like, oh, I can't just keep doing it. It's gonna,
Yeah,
unless I
yeah,
have a reason.
exactly. Yeah, and it's tough too because like I think when you fall in love with a song too, especially like you don't want to overplay it because then you lose the novelty and the magic of it
Exactly.
when you overplay things. Like that happened to me with in a different way, but like running up the hill
I
with
did the
Kate Bush.
same thing.
I was like
I
one of
had
my
to stop.
favorite songs, and I was so stoked for her and for like people, especially kids, to like learn who Kate Bush is because I'm a huge Kate Bush fan. But then I was just like, dude, if I have to hear that song one more time, like I'm done. Like I can't listen to that song the same way now. It's just it's sort of taken on this very different
It was playing
space in my
everywhere.
brain. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
constant, and it's almost like a caricature of itself now. Like what,
Right.
and so that's there's something about like kind of leaving things that you love, like letting them go a little bit, and kind of giving it space to breathe, so you don't like wear yourself out on it. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Like in a couple of years you'll come back to it and you're like, "Ah, that's it again. That's
right,
what it
yeah,
was."
5 years from now, we'll come full circle back to Kate Bush's grace and splendor.
Exactly. So on that note, you said 16, like in your teens you're already listening to goth. Is that when you kind of leaned into your gothness or what,
Yeah, I mean, I guess to some degree, I found it when I was actually a little bit younger than that because my sister was into sort of goth music and more the aesthetic. I think she was like she kind of was in. She's 6 years older, so she was into the goth scene in like the mid to late '90s, and it was very like, in my opinion, it was kind of cheesy back then. Like it became like a little much, and some of it's great, but I think that was when it became sort of like the media like hyper fixated on like, look at these spooky dark weirdos, they're all like morose and sad, and they're all like because like I mean some of it was because of the culture that was good culture, like movies like The Crow. That's a very like honest, real, heartbreaking movie, and the graphic novel that it's based off of is even more emotionally devastating than the movie is. But I think it became a little bit of a caricature as well. So she was, I think, my interpretations, like remembering her, was she was really into sort of the like romanticism of it, and maybe less the music. But there were sprinklings of the music that I would hear, but I didn't really like. I was so young that I didn't really like fully comprehend the scope of like goth subculture. It was just kind of like, oh, my sister's like into spooky stuff, and I like that too. So because we were always watching like horror movies and stuff. That was one of the big things in our house. Is like
Same.
probably
Yeah.
too young to watch a lot of this stuff, but
That's
my dad
yeah.
was like, oh, you'll be fine. So I guess
Same.
remains to be seen whether that was a good idea or not for me. I don't know, but
Likewise.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think like I was 13 or 14 when I first kind of really started to listen to the music of especially the classics, like the late 70s, early 80s post-punk and goth rock stuff that just really resonated with me, and I think a lot of that is I didn't really understand it for the longest time until actually kind of quite recently why that stuff resonated with me so much. So I'm a huge music history nerd, and I read a lot of books about like where bands come from now, and like what their pathway was, because I think it's really interesting and it tells a lot of the story of the music.
It
And I was
does.
reading, actually, I'm reading Cured, which is Lowell Tolhurst's book about the Cure, and
Nice.
he basically talks about the town that they're from. It's just north of London, and it's just this like really bland, like ultra suburban, like very just there's just nothing going on at that time. Especially, it was just so like lower middle class, just like and there was no culture, there was no sense of like artistry or whatever, and they found music, and that was their escape, that was like their ability to get out of there. And it's like, yeah, that was the same experience for me growing up in rural Georgia, where there was nothing. I mean, it was not suburban, but it was, I just remember being a kid and just and wanting so desperately, I wished so badly that I could be just a little bit older so I could just get out of there and just go start living life and like experiencing things and being part of anything. And so I think that that's like why a lot of that early 80s, late 70s post-punk resonated with me so much, was that it was like speaking to the same kind of circumstance where it was like, you've just got to get out of this like droll, mundane, sort of gray
Yeah,
existence
it's
that.
like oppressive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally sympathize with that. It's, just trying to, yeah, feeling trapped, really. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so it's like there's must be more than this provincial life. This, yeah, Monday.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's for me similarly why goth like resonates with me, and just yeah, I'm always been drawn to darkness and and stuff. But I mean, it was interesting because like for a long time I kind of stayed away from like allowing myself to. I mean, I would do it in doses, like in my teens and stuff. I definitely was more like alternative and everything, and
Right.
but then I got some weird messages from like adults and people about like, oh well, you're just like choosing to be negative and stuff. But then I met some really great friends who are goth that are like the most positive, peppy, perky people, and I'm like,
Yeah.
they showed me that you don't have to be like, I don't know, this unapproachable,
Right.
sad, like unfun person at all. It's not
Yes.
about that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
think in fact that's the irony of it, is like, and again, I think a lot of that is media portrayal.
yes,
It's just like easier to like sort of stereotype down like like a typecasted character identity into this like dumb thing that people go, "Oh, I know what this person's about because they wear black and they like macabre stuff." Um, but in reality, it's like, I really love when people come out to like our shows for Vision Video or to Goth Nights, because we, like Dan and I from the band, we DJ our local Goth Night here in Athens with a few other people, and like it's so cool to me when people come out for the very first time and they're like, I had no idea that it was this much fun. And I'm like, yeah, that's the whole point. Like, why would you do something with a bunch of people that are like sulking in the shadows and like, there are aspects of, darkness in in macabre, proclivities in the music and the lyrics and all that stuff. But I mean, that's like, there's a duality to everything. And I think
exactly.
that's like what really resonates with me, is just like, uh, seeing all of this like, um, not so pretty things by traditional standards, and still finding beauty in it, and still finding like time to appreciate things like death, or you know, um, sadness. Even like, I think there's power to being sad. It's like, uh, as a person that has pretty intense post traumatic stress, like a lot of my life is lived in a very steady state, sort of flatness, where I'm not sad but I'm not happy. I'm just sort of there, and I'm
Yeah.
just sort of like moving through. And so sometimes for me, like to experience a melancholic day is kind of nice in a way, because I feel a little bit more connected to the world than sometimes where I feel very disconnected, and that's disconnection is not good. That's a bad thing that people should not dwell in. So anyway, I think a lot of this stuff is about duality and finding, like I always say, it's beauty in the margins. It's like there's you got to find these little cracks and crevices where there's like cool, interesting, wonderful, even if they're not traditionally beautiful things, they still can be like things that you can appreciate.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot to be said about kind of latching on or connecting with your shadow, your darker side, because what happens with a lot of people is when you don't, it kind of secretly runs the show, and then and then you're disconnected, and it'll come out when it'll work its way out. So
yes, it will.
Yeah. No, I totally identify with so much of that. And I was just wondering, like, transitioning from finding your gothness, how Vision Video's formation came to be. What was that like? How did you create it?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. It happened in a very like Athens way, which means so we're from Athens, Georgia, and Athens is this like beautiful little weird college town here in northeast Georgia. We have the University of Georgia, which is like I went to college here,
Nice.
and it's got this very storied music history. The post-punk radio rock, like college radio rock scene of the late 70s into the mid 80s was just so prolific. You had bands like the B-52s, which is effectively queer disco punk from the late 70s.
They're fantastic.
Like just absolutely amazing musicians that totally redefined or created effectively a new genre of music in a way.
That's a fantastic way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing sounds like the B-52s except for older music that influenced them, like doo-wop and Motown and just like so many other elements of music. But they really kind of took that stuff and made it like a like part of new wave in such a bizarre way that like it almost like if you described it to somebody back then, they probably would have been like, "What are you talking about?" But I think it works really well. But then you had REM and Pylon, and REM. Like a lot of people sort of dismiss REM because of they became like a very huge band akin to like U2 or Coldplay, and when you hit a certain level of success and fame, I think people just sort of like it becomes like cool to like shit on a band for no reason because it becomes like a bit poppier and a little bit more accessible, and a lot of those bands have to then acquiesce to their major labels and all this sort of thing. But their first few records are like absolutely amazing, and it's like straight post-punk. It's like that you can hear elements of like Britpop and like what was happening in the British post-punk scene, with the Smiths and Joy Division in their music, and it's really, really influential on me. And then like bands like a little lesser known, but like just as important, Pylon. Just they're still. We're actually playing with Vanessa Hay of Pylon. She has a new group called the Pylon Reenactment Society, which is like. It's kind of her and some new band members. But anyway, so, Athens has this amazing scene, but what's as equally as important is that the infrastructure of music is here. So we have all these great venues like the Georgia Theater, which is a world-class 1,000-capacity venue that draws international artists all the time. We have the 40 Watt Club, which is like where really the B-52s and REM Pylon, those bands like really kind of made that place what it is. It's about a 600 cap venue, but again, draws internationally renowned musicians and artists. And then we have a ton of like very small venues where bands can get their legs and learn the stagecraft. You learn, like, you can be the best musician in the world, but if you've never played a gig, if you've never gone to a show, you don't understand that there's like load in, sound check. Okay, get your shit off the stage. All right, get ready. Like, go watch the band, support. There's all these things that you have to learn by doing, and they're great places here because they're small and they're like kind of the kids' gloves of like, hey, this is how you do this stuff, and they'll walk you through, and it's just training. But anyway, I was working when I left the military. I kind of fell back on bartending for a while
I
back in
bartend.
2016. Yeah, there you go. It's like the best thing you can do in the world, because when you learn to bartend, you can work anywhere at any time. Somebody will hire you if you have any experience. So I was waiting on a grad school application back in. I left the military. I left the active army, and I was just like, well, I'm just going to bartend for this year. Wait for this application. I got kind of waitlisted for a while, but I was bartending at the Georgia Theater, which is that amazing, really big venue, and I was posting online just like little riffs and little just like tidbits of songs, like little fractured concepts of songs on like Facebook. And one of the barbacks, who's our drummer, Jason Fusco, he came up to me, and he's in a really great punk band called She He He, and it's like kind of 70s classic like jet punk, like, you know, it's got like kind of Ramones sound. It's really fun.
Nice.
But he was like, hey, I know you like my band, and I thought he was an amazing drummer. So he's like, why don't you come over sometime and I'll put some drums behind this guitar stuff that you're doing. So we did that, and we started in turn posting that on Facebook and YouTube and whatnot. And then I got a call, or actually Jason got a call from Dan Geller, who was in like some really influential synth pop bands in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he ran this like small but like very strong indie label called Kindercore. That put out a lot of really amazing stuff in the early 2000s. And I actually used to go sneak into his shows when I was too young to get into the clubs to go see him play or DJ, because he was always DJing like The Cure or The Smiths and that kind of stuff. But anyway, he called us up and was like, hey, I want to play bass for you guys. Let me come by and like throw down some bass. And we brought him in, and he totally got what we were trying to do. We put on our first show as a 3-piece that year, so that was like late 2017, actually.
Okay.
And so we played an October show on the rooftop of the Georgia Theater. There's like a small rooftop bar, and it was like really well received. And in the audience was my friend Emily Friedock, and we were already looking for a keyboardist, and I didn't realize like a mutual friend of Emily and I's was like, hey, you know, Emily is like classically trained in piano, so we brought her in. And she had never played in a band before. She'd only played like competitive piano when she was a kid. So like really terse, like you just play what's written. She'd never written anything on her own, and never played synthesizer. So we slid this thing in front of her, and it was just like, you know, she was really nervous at first, but once she kind of relaxed into it and kind of understood, it's like, just do what you intuit and what comes to you. She just started killing it, because she knows the theory. She knows every single note, you know, she knows exactly what key, everything, and she just absolutely killed it. And she's an invaluable member, you know. So that's kind of like, but the funny thing about it is all of that formed around this like service industry. It was all around bartending and serving, as Emily's like, you know, a bartender by trade. Jason was a bar back. You know, Dan's been a DJ. Like, we are all people that and like, that's the story of Athens, is like, you know, you have 25,000 students here and all these restaurants and bars, and the locals work those restaurants and bars because they're artists and they want to pay the bills with that so that they can make music or art or whatever. And it's like cool. And that's actually like why we named it Vision Video, was because Vision Video was a video store here in Athens that I grew up with. It was sort of the punk rock locally owned Blockbuster, and it was amazing. Like, it finally went out of business in like 2017. It lasted a long time.
Like right when your formation happened, it's almost like it got passed on to you.
I think it might have been the end of 2016, but it was right in that year before we started. And we were like, you know, it was kind of recommended as a joke at first. I think Jason or Dan was like, oh, Vision Video, that'd be a cool name. And we were all like, wait, that's kind of perfect, because it's sort of like retro and it's got like cool alliteration, but it's also like a very meaningful part of our experience in the city, and something
it lives
that we loved
on
a lot.
through you guys.
And when we started, the funny part is, though, when we started, you know, we had flyers up all around the city or whatever, or people would just be like, oh, did you hear this band called Vision Video? It's like the video store. Like, oh, crazy, you know? And so it kind of resonated culturally in a like microcosmic way here in Athens, which was kind of fun. And it still is. Like every now and then people that have moved away for years, if not decades, will play in a town or a city or whatever, and people will come out and they'll be like, I didn't know anything about you. I just saw the name and I knew that it was Vision Video from Athens, and then I looked you up and then I was like, oh my God. And so people will just come out sometimes that are like, yeah, I went to college in the 90s and I love Vision Video, so now I love you guys. And it's like, whoa, like what a crazy small world it can be, you know.
I love that so much. Yeah, there's something about the sound of it that's very like 80s, like, you know, it makes me think like Video Killed the Radio Star, like, you know,
Yeah.
just it has that like retro, like, yeah, kind of new way, like it's awesome. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it has so much meaning. It's not arbitrary. It wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
that's way cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that store like formed a lot of my taste in movies, because it wasn't like Blockbuster or like Hollywood Video or whatever where you walked in and it's just like whatever. It's a franchise. This was run
Yes.
by mostly college kids. We have like a really big art school here at the university, and like a lot of film students and stuff like that would
Ooh.
run the store. And so you would go in and they had this like huge employee pick section, and they always had all the weird cult stuff. So like, and the best part was that you'd walk in and it would be like, there's my person, you know. And I remember being like 17, 18 when I first, like, I dropped out of high school and I moved to Athens. I went to the big city, which is not, it's not a big city, but to me it was, you know. And I remember there was this like this punk rock girl that I was like, I had a crush on, and she had her section, and she was into all the like weird cult horror stuff. And I would always go talk to her, and she was always like, I was really shy, so I was like too shy to be like, hey, you know, but she was very like, hey, it's good to see you again. Hey, I know you watched The Reanimator last week, so go check out, Dead Alive next. And it was just like a lot of me learning my taste of like film through that place. So yeah, it really had a massive impact on me. But I think, you know, and this is a little bit more like maybe pretense, but I think it matters to me. One thing that I miss about the world and how things are now is that, like, okay, so back then you walked into a store and you scanned the stacks and you found stuff either by somebody telling you like, hey, watch this because I like this a lot, and I think because of your taste you probably like this, or you found it because of the artwork. But it was a very like visceral, real experience where you're immediately connected to what's going on around you. Now everything that we consume through culture, unless it's told to you by a friend, is curated by an algorithm. So a scientifically or mathematically based algorithm goes, hey Dusty, you watched this, we think you'll like this next. And it's so wrong, like all the fucking time. And you're being funneled into an illusion of choice. So when you go into a video store, there's like tens of thousands of movies, or a record store, there's tens of thousands of records. Whereas like now you only have, like, if you go on Netflix, there's like only a few thousand videos at any given time, and they rotate that out, and it's all being sort of culturally curated by money, because those studios work with these streaming platforms to make sure that you only see XYZ, and all this other weird stuff is out of the purview. And it's like upsetting to me, because I think that like I said, it's the illusion of choice now. We feel like we have all this ability to watch whatever, whenever, but it's just, it feels like I feel cheated having had that experience, and now you have this experience when you're like, you can't find anything that, and 99% of it sucks. Like, let's be real. All of us spend hours of our lives just sorting through streaming services now, just trying to find anything that's of like any real value. And it's just like, why am I even paying for this? Like,
Yes,
I don't know.
it's a lot. It's
That's
so
my rant.
expensive. No, I completely agree. It's like there is that kind of personal touch, like that you just, you can't get through the computer.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then also the way that it was, yeah, like, I don't know, so consciously, like, with thought put into it, like
yeah.
you had a selection of things that other human beings thought were worthy of
Right.
others watching.
Yeah.
So
And
dang.
and if they didn't have something, you could ask them and they'd get it for you. They'd be like, it's like a library, you know. It's like, oh, we don't have that, but we'll figure it out. We'll get it in stock, you know. And it's like, okay, cool, because that's how they kept, you know, your relationship as a customer supporting their business is like, we care about getting the things that you want to consume. And I mean, you know, like I could write a letter to Netflix and be like, hey, I really want to see the original RoboCop, and they'd be like,
And
whatever,
yeah,
dude.
they're like,
We don't care.
cool,
Yeah, great.
cool.
Good for you. We'll take your $15 or whatever the hell I pay. It's probably $20 now. I don't even know.
Yeah, it just keeps going up.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give someone just starting out in music? What would you tell baby bat Dusty?
Oh, man. I think probably the biggest thing is just like consistency. You know, like if you're starting out, like we live in this world where like you know you can get on an app like TikTok and you can have a song or a video of any kind blow up and you can just all of a sudden have all these followers because that's happened to us. Like that happens sometimes with these crazy apps. Um, but that immediacy of that like dopamine rush of like, oh man, we just gained like 10,000 followers in a weekend. Like that just happened to us like on TikTok. Like I reposted a video and it went nuts and it got viewed 1 million times again. And I'm just like, that's cool, but none of that matters. Like none of these numbers matter if you're not connecting to people. And the only way to connect to people is through consistent FaceTime with them and real honest like connection. And the only way to do that is like if you're a musician, get out on the road, go tour, or engage with people constantly online, which that's my job now. I just get on the internet and I just spend time with strangers, just responding to comments because to me it's like you know it's kind of normal. It's like a very I do it hundreds, if not thousands, of times a day. But for somebody to get a response from one of their favorite artists, it's like it makes their day, and that makes them feel a little bit closer and connected. But more importantly, 100% is touring. But anyway, all these things require longevity and consistency. Um, I mean, even if you had the most viral hit song of the year. Like, let's say tomorrow I posted a new song, and for whatever reason, the algorithmic gods were like, Hominus Dominus, you are now blessed with 30 million views, vision video, wild. And it would be nuts. And it would be, I would love that. It would be crazy. And that's like what we all kind of want out of those apps is like, maybe we'll hit that. Like, it's like such a dumb lottery system. But then what happens in a month when everybody is completely forgotten about that? The only people that will remember are the people that you've really connected with and that you've like shown that you care about. Like, I think one of my benefits of my life is that I'm a little bit older and I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. I've been through a war. I've been through 5 years as a paramedic and firefighter, and that doesn't make me better than anybody else, but it does give me access to insight, and it makes me appreciate the value of what really matters in life. And I think that for me, like I'm not trying to do this stuff like with music to bolster my ego or to make a bunch of money or anything like that, because those are hollow things. Those don't lead to happiness. Those don't lead to fulfillment. What absolutely leads to fulfillment for me is feeling like I'm making art that I know without a reasonable doubt 1000% has saved my life, if I can make that art in a way that also helps people, even if it's small or maybe it's big, you know, some people might hear a song that on a really awful day that helps them get through that day, and maybe they wouldn't have made it through that day. I don't know, but more likely than not, it's just I listened to a song and the lyrics just helped me connect to the world and made me feel a little bit better about getting on through whatever I'm going through. And like one of my favorite musicians was this guy named Scott Hutchison, and he lost his battle to mental health and he took his own life. But his whole thing, he was in this band called Frightened Rabbit, and they had this song that espoused the ideology, but his whole thing was make tiny changes to the earth while we're still alive. And I that hit me musically and like emotionally and philosophically at this really important time. And that's exactly how I think now. It's like I'm not going to ever be this person that makes sea change in swaths of the population, but it doesn't matter, because if I can make music that connects and makes people go, all right, I feel a little tiny bit better about the circumstances that I'm afforded in this life, then I am fulfilled. But you like, in order for that to kind of happen, especially now, and this is where the advice part, I guess, I'm sorry, I'm so like my brain
No,
goes
this
off
is
in a million
all like
directions.
super fascinating, and yeah.
But if you're a musician or an artist or anything in the creative realm now, the problem is like, especially in America, there are so many people doing it, and that's great. It's not a problem in and of itself. Like, it's actually a very good thing that people are able to so immediately access music and can put it out there and get it out there and make art and put it online and promote things that they love and that make them happy and fulfilled. But, you know, if you're trying to do it professionally and sustain yourself, that's where it's different.
Yes.
And you have to cut through a lot of noise. And honestly, the biggest part of that, like I said, is longevity, discipline, and just not quitting. You know,
Yes.
just staying consistent. You know, play the game, post your stuff on your apps, and do all that. But, you know, just you have to be kind of obsessed with it and just fall in love
Yes.
with it all the time and be consumed by it, because that's what it requires now. If I had not been former military or and a firefighter and all that stuff, there's no way in hell I would have the discipline to do this. I mean, no way. And I wouldn't, you know, I think that's where like most people get into this stuff, because it is so much fun and you feel so good doing it, and it is universal and wonderful, and it's this like beautiful sort of like esoteric thing that happens when you perform on a stage in front of, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, it doesn't matter, it always happens. But you know, it's like, I don't know, there's so much more involved these days than I think people realize, and it just, if you're not constantly working on it and constantly making it your life's work, and being obsessed with it, then it's just not going to be something that is going to be your job. But that's like, I think the most important thing that people should know, though, is like, don't worry about that. You know what I mean? Like, love the thing that you do,
Yes.
and just do it.
Get
Like,
lost in the
everybody tries to
doing.
monetize everything now, and I never thought that this was something that would be my job until it just became my job. Like, it grew to a point where I was like, I was at a weird crossroads too, because I was 5 years of being a firefighter. I was a little burnout from the military and just all this traumatic stuff. And I was just like, this band I've got this like once in a lifetime opportunity to follow something that I really love, and I'm going to go do it. But you know, and there was a lot of work that made that happen, but it was never like, that's the goal, is just to make money and to do, you know what I mean? So you have to have,
Exactly.
I think that's the second thing, is just like, you have to have, your reasons have to be genuine and cannot be for hollow reasons, because maybe you'll get there, but it'll kill you, because you will have worked so hard to get to a place where you are making a little bit of money or you are seeing success as a creative, uh, but then what's the point? Because okay, you have that thing, but the fulfillment isn't there,
Yeah.
and it's just such a bankrupt thing to follow. So I don't know.
No,
That's what
I
I would tell myself.
likewise. I was very, when I decided to pursue acting, and it was a hard choice for me because I started off, getting my BA in psychology, and I was like, I'm going to go to
Hmm.
grad school for psychology because I am very passionate about mental health issues, and
Yeah,
I'll touch back on that with you. I have a
yeah,
question
yeah.
about that, but it was a hard choice, and I told myself like I have to go into this knowing that I would be happy, you know, doing the do, getting lost in the doing of it indefinitely with
Right.
no potential, possibly no material visible like evidence of it working,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's a lot of it, is getting passionate about expression and connection and creating. And
Yes.
I really so agree with you on that.
That's
It's
awesome.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
And
it's
I
like,
think, I mean,
yeah.
probably correct me if I'm wrong, but for you, especially with acting, I think because it's even more rare. Like I think it's such a hard thing to crack into that like when you do have successes, when you are following those things because of the correct intentions, you feel more fulfilled when you do succeed. It's
I
like
would hope so. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. No, 100%. I think that you'll have longevity is the difference, because, the choices you make will be different. You'll hopefully surround yourself with the right people,
right.
and not get lost in, you know, glitzy, aspects and, superficial things.
Yes,
And so
yeah.
you'll have your support system there, and
Yeah.
you'll truly be there for the craft of it, as opposed to, they say, like, do you, and this probably goes the same thing, like, do you want to be an actor or a movie star? There's a
Right.
little bit of a distinction when you really think about, yeah, like those things. So do you want to be a musician or do you want to be a rock star? So,
Right.
not saying they're mutually exclusive, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. There's some crossover at some point, but I mean, yeah, it's like, yeah, it seems like your end goal has to be sort of realistic, but then it also has to just be like, and I think when you are trying to be a movie star or rock star or whatever, you're filling a void that cannot be filled. Whereas people that are just trying to portray or purvey their craft
Hmm.
and do something they love, that in and of itself is satisfaction. It's not about the ends. It's like the means, I
It's
guess.
the process. It's like who you become through having, you know, done the work and the play and the experimentation.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, yeah, I wanted to touch on what you were talking about with mental health. I love that you're so vocal about how mental health issues and gothness and spookiness provides an outlet for processing those darker human emotions with trauma,
Yeah.
grief, depression. I've been many years in therapy for depression, anxiety because of a trauma I experienced in my household growing up. And I have like complex PTSD. It was like, the same circumstance going on very long.
Right.
And now, in turn, you're able to contribute to those ends as an artist. And oops, did it again. Yeah, you're able to contribute to those ends as an artist. And,
Yeah.
it's so cool. And, I love like your songs are so deep and like touching. And I'm like, oh my God, this like, it just feels like you're being seen in a way. And again,
Yeah.
it must be really cool to like be a part of that and make somebody feel less alone in that way,
Right.
that it's okay to feel disconnected or not okay, but like it's not like your total anomaly or
Right.
it's Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes
Yeah.
you feel connected to, like, yeah, be able to connect with somebody on that,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's everything for me. It's like being able to make art that resonates in such in a way that like it's. I mean, it's self-serving for me too.
Yeah.
Because it has to be for me, and I really like Rick Rubin's new book where he talks about the process of creating art, and he's just like this amazing producer, and he talks about kind of at one point in the book he mentions like never make art for your audience, make it for you first. And I think that that's extremely true. Like it's a very real thing where you have to kind of accept that if you're making art for an audience, you're making a product. You're not making art. You're making something to be
Yeah.
sold. And I've had some very like hard moments of stopping myself when I'm making music or whatever and be like, is this really something that I want to make, or is this something that I'm trying to make that sounds a certain way? And I'll just get rid of it now. And I believe that it has to be kind of self-serving. It has to be something because that's how you make something that's genuine and that's something that's real. And I think that people's bullshit meters are like so much better than they used to be now. Like, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing that we are able to kind of see through the fog of like, you know, like rock and roll or film or whatever. Like we can see through that kind of like like I mean I flip through TikTok all day, just like just consuming content to help me process like how to make content myself
Exactly.
sometimes.
You have to
And
be a
I think we all
consumer
do it.
to, yeah.
Yeah. And I see so many musicians that are like, like doing really well, but they're like, it's also like, man, that like I can see through this. This is like kind of bullshit, and I mean,
They're
but a
selling
lot
like
of
a
people,
yeah. They're
yeah,
selling
yeah, a lot of
something.
people, right? They're selling something, and a lot of people want simple. They want the candy handed to them. They don't want to think about it, but that's not like the kind of person that I'm hoping to connect with anyway. So I don't care about that. But yeah, so for me, like to kind of explain a lot of our music, like our first record was mostly written in 2018, and that was like one of the worst years of my life. It was a time where I was fresh out into the field as a medic and a firefighter, and I was a very, very good paramedic. But I was what you call like a black cloud. I'm not like there's a lot of things that I give a grain of salt to, and a lot of things that I don't. But there's you ask any paramedic or anybody in the EMS world, like some people get on an ambulance and bad things happen. I'm one of them.
Oh dang.
And like the amount of just crazy things that I saw in just a few short years of time. Like I remember like right before I left the fire department, I was having this chat with this like chief, of 30 years. He was a veteran. He was about to retire. And I was just like telling him we were just trading war stories, so to speak, and just telling him all these things. And he was like, dude, you've seen so many crazy calls. He's like, I don't like, that's nuts. And I was like, yeah, it's just one of those things. And I was very good at it. I'm very, very calm in utter chaos. When things go totally nuts, that's when I'm typically my best, where I'm just like, yep, I know what I need to do. I know how to get us out of this situation and how to make the best out of the worst. And most of that is just staying calm. But anyway, that's like just in the moment. That's when it's happening. What I was never great at was coming home from those things, these unbelievable tragedies. I mean, things just that happen all the time that like don't make it in the news because they don't want people to know how bad it is out there and how much horrible, awful tragedy and awful things happen all the time.
Jeez.
But I would come home and I would just process after the fact, and I wouldn't do anything to do something healthy about it. I would exercise, but that was kind of it. And then I started to drink a little too much, not crazy, but a little too much, especially during the lockdowns during COVID. But that's kind of later on. But I was just.
I think that was a lot of people.
Yeah. That was
Not saying it was good, but
right. But it was like 2018. was just this, there was this like time around October of 2018. So we'd been a band for about a year, and it was, we were kind of writing the record, and I was in this weird brain space where like I just didn't care about anything that happened to me anymore, and a lot of that started to affect my relationships. Like I dated this one girl and it was going really well, and I like sabotaged it because I just like stopped caring, and I stopped calling my friends, and I stopped talking to my parents, and I stopped talking to everybody, and I just sort of lived in my own world. And I would do the bare minimum in a lot of ways, and because everything about everything would remind me of all these like crazy awful things that I was seeing all the time. And I started to get this thing in my head that was like, what's the point, because you're just going to die, and everybody is just going to die, so there's really no point in spending all this time and energy and effort into everything, because like, and it's not like we're lucky if we're going to die at the age of 75 or 80 or whatever in bed at night, like, the last scene of Titanic, like yes. That's it's a lot of us are going to go in very awful ways, in very sudden, tragic, heartbreaking ways. And I just couldn't get out of that mental space. I could not extract myself. And then that started leading me down these very bad ideations of like, well, you know what? I was so consumed by that thought that I was like, I don't even see the point of me being here. Right. And I can't see myself getting better. And then it started to go worse, and it was getting darker, and it was getting to, I don't think I want to be here. I don't think I want to keep doing this job. I don't think I want to keep being alive, to even worse, I think I want to die. Right. And it got even worse than that. And I won't go further because that's for me, but
absolutely.
There was this moment where like but the music started to reflect that. And it reflected the fight that I was going through, and that I still deal with. I mean, it's like being suicidal is like being an addict. Once you are that thing, it's there forever. Because once that gets into your head, you can learn to get away from it and to deal with it and to process it and to be healthy with it. But it will always be there when you really are that close. And yeah, like 2018 was just that. And it was literally the music, that first record, the band, who are all such good, close friends of mine, and a couple other very close friends that like just saved my life. Like, there was like one day, it was Halloween of 2018, where I was like, this is it, I'm done. And a friend called me and he was like, you're not okay, and I need you to be okay, so I'm coming over. And I was like, all right, and it was like I would have done something that night. So,
his intuition, man, good friends.
Yeah. Oh, he knew. He saw me. He was just like, you're not you. You're not yourself. So once I started to kind of get into a healthier place, a few weeks after that whole thing, with that Halloween, and I was able to kind of see through the fog a little bit, and I started going to more therapy because I was already in therapy, but it wasn't enough, and it was. I went through some really intensive, like a couple weeks where I was there every day, and just kind of getting through it. That's when I was able to kind of see out of the fog, I started to realize that the music was the thing that was really going to help me, and that's when I really started to push on that. And and it's like I said, it's still something I still feel just as passionate about it in that regard, especially as I did back in 2018, because it's so vital for me. Like, I think being able to create and process all these memories and emotions and just my perception of the world, which I think is a little different because of my informed experience, is something that when I'm, old, and look back, if I'm afforded the opportunity to grow old, I want to be able to look back and be like, I made this stuff. Yeah, it helped me, but I'm so glad that I made this and that it resonated in a meaningful way. And maybe I hope that when I'm, say, 65, 70 or whatever, and I look back on all this work that I've done, that I will know that it helped save lives. Because there's, of all the things that I've done, being a paramedic, when you save somebody's life, as a team of people, when you get pulses back on a cardiac arrest, or you like get a stroke patient to the hospital and they get a full recovery, or you save a trauma patient from bleeding out or whatever, it's like indescribable. And I get insight to that feeling again. I get insight to that still when I play shows and people come up to me and they say, hey, I went through this really extremely bad thing, and your song X really helped me get through that. And
that's what it's about.
It's like I feel good about that. I feel like I'm still doing something just as significant as like literally putting IV lines and like plugging gunshot wounds and stuff like that. It's a different way, but
you've done your time with that. You've done that way of saving lives.
I hope you're okay. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm good. I'm good. It was beautiful, and no, it really cemented. Like, it's hard because we have it in our head that, we got to do the straight and narrow path. And that was what I had such a hard time getting over, transitioning from, I'm going to do therapy. I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to do therapy. And I'm going to go to grad school and do that. But then I was like, I think I'm going to really regret on my deathbed not having pursued acting, because I do love it. And it was like, it's not as honorable as doing, some form of, being a doctor or, paramedic, firefighter. But really, I mean, you do hear those stories about cancer patients saying like, man, I watched The Office and that got me through, Yeah. Sorry, I really doesn't.
No, you're totally fine. And I think there is honor to it, because I think one of the most honorable things that we can do as human beings is to be authentically ourselves. Like at all costs. And if you're not doing what you love, and if you're not in line with what the universe is telling you that you should be doing, then you are living a life that is maybe not bad, but you're not in that pipeline of where you should be. And that, I think, is it's one of the only things that we can really truly own in this world. Everything else is just a bunch of bullshit, but one thing that you can own is yourself and who you are and who you become, and the actions and decisions that you own and that define you. Those are the things that matter. Your status in whether it's money or accolade or whatever, like that doesn't matter. Are you living your life in a way that you feel like you are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
That's what matters. And then, like you said, you don't even understand, and it didn't resonate with me how much my art was resonating with other people and affecting change in other people's lives, and maybe just small ways. But if it happens over and over and over again, you start to see like, okay, yeah, this matters, and this is making a difference, and that is just as satisfying. Like I said, it really is just as satisfying for me to play a show and then have somebody come up to me and tell me their story and be like, hey, because I always hang out after shows. I think it's the most important part of the show is like you put on the performance, but then you have to connect with the people. So I always come and just chill out, and I'll be there as long as people want me to be there, or until the venue kicks us out, which happens. But people will tell you like very clearly and very honestly and candidly, like, hey, this has made a difference for me, and that's just as satisfying as making a save on a crazy medical call, or like putting out a big fire or whatever. It's it's just as important, because everything is also connected. You don't know, your art might save somebody from a bad day, which gives them the inspiration to go out and create something, the cure for cancer, or whatever. Like we cannot process. It's impossible for us to understand our effects out, like our ripple effects into the universe. But I do know that you have to make those ripples, and you have to, you know, affect change in the world, and you know, make those tiny changes, and make those changes that make people want to also in kind do better and do good, and to live healthier and live more fulfilled lives, I guess.
Yeah, and with integrity and alignment and
Right.
authenticity. Yeah, that's yeah. I feel like for me, some there have been times where like inauthenticity has been killer for me. Like
Yeah.
feeling like I'm not. I have to like somehow, yeah, subvert a part of myself, and at the sacrifice of who I am. It can really wear on you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's and that's I think every creative person goes through that exact thing
Mm-hmm.
where you feel like you have to sort of kowtow to, you know, whatever is happening around you to succeed, or to get, you know, a little bit of opportunity or whatever. And I mean, funny enough, I made a TikTok today. It's like a little video where I met this woman today. I was out running errands, and she was or is a nurse practitioner, but she worked in the ER for like 10 years, and now she's working in like a small clinic. And her, you know, her and I were just immediately able to bond like instantly, because like we've been in this really crazy weird world where like you have to be real, and you have to be like straight up with people, and you have to make like split second decisions. So when you're in
Yeah.
those kinds of environments, you get this like insane camaraderie with people. And I've never met this woman. When we were just immediately like, oh man, this one time this happened, oh crazy. And we were talking about like gross, like gory stuff that we'd seen, and you know, and it's not to like glamorize it, but you just you get this sense of connection to somebody so fast. And I miss that in the music world, and I'm sure it's the same in acting and any creative world. There's so much zero sum game mentality where it's like, oh, if person X gets ahead, I can't get ahead because they
Mm-hmm.
got that opportunity. And that's such a dumb, like bankrupt bullshit ideology. Like, especially in localized communities, when somebody does really well, like you know, everybody starts to gain a little bit of traction, because that's just like it's just a phenomenon that
Mm-hmm.
tends to happen. But there's also just like so much opportunity out there for everybody. The people that are going to do well are the ones that work really hard. But
Yes.
aside from that, I really miss like how much, you know, connection and just immediate like camaraderie I had with people in these other things that I did. And I just hope that like people can sort of recognize that that's like so important, to just like to be not concerned with getting ahead on top of each other, building each other up, like, you know, supporting your friends and even your peers and or competitors, like supporting people, because you know that's how everything gets better, is like when we feel connected. I mean, that's anything in life. When you feel disconnected and you feel isolated, that's when like bad things manifest.
That's
Uh,
yes.
you know, there's this amazing book called Tribe. I think it's called Tribe.
Ooh,
It's by this guy named
I'm writing it down.
Sebastian Junger, and he was a combat correspondent. He was in this really bad place called Cop Restrepo in Afghanistan. He was just like a photojournalist there, and they were like massively attacked by the Taliban, and he was with them while like under this massive siege, and there was this like, huge battle, and a lot of Americans died during that battle. And but anyway, his book Tribe is not about the battle. It's about all these guys that he spent all this time with after they got home. And one of the things that's really interesting is he talks about like, you know, most of the guys that immediately got home from all of that chaos and like the worst trauma you could possibly imagine, the guys that immediately left the army, they were the ones that had really intense problems psychologically. The guys that stayed in, they were mostly okay. And it's specifically because of one reason. The guys that stayed in felt connected to the world around them because they were with their people, and they were with people that understood them. the guys that got out went back to the civilian world that doesn't give a shit about that craziness. And it's not to say, I think the lesson for most people out of that is like, well, don't glamorize war. Don't go to war. It's don't join the army. Like, don't do any of that stuff. Maybe. I mean, if you need to, I don't know. But the point of it is, for me, and I think the really amazing takeaway of that is that, like, we have so much power when we are connected to each other. And we have so much ability to create and to forge bonds and to feel like we're part of something when we're connected to each other. And when we move away from that, you just lock yourself away, and it's just, for some people, it's not survivable. And I feel like the world gets colder, and even though we are so connected with all this shit, all these like amazing pieces of technology, it also feels a lot less connected to me in a lot of ways. I feel isolated despite constantly communicating with people sometimes. So, you know, we have to remember that, like, now more than ever, you know, getting over our differences with each other, getting over things that like this sort of capitalist, like ultra unfettered capitalist environment that just puts us up against each other constantly. It's just constant competition, constant dog eat dog. Yeah. You know, that shit is so untenable. We have to get away from that. We have to communicate. We have to connect and feel like we're part of something. And whether that's being a creative or just being a citizen of the world, like, we have to feel like there's stakes, you know, and that there is meaning. But we will only do that if we can just feel like each other are human beings, and that we can understand each other. So I don't know. I mean, I got a little.
No, this is fantastic. There, but... Like, community is, I feel such something that's like suffering so much right now with, you know, coming out of the pandemic, and like how much we rely on social media. And there's just such I don't know, like there's a lot of nuance missed in communicating via like email, text, and direct message that, you know, you can't exactly get when you're not like in person. You know, and it's just like, and then there's just like tensions and stuff, and again, it can get really lonely, oddly, and that's almost like worse and that probably might have been leading into what those veterans were experiencing. They were around people, but not the ones that made them feel like integral to where they could express what they had experienced in a way that, you know, was truthful and really working through it.
Right. Dang. And then you're like kind of also felt, you know, and I experienced this when I came back out of Afghanistan in Germany. It was not as bad because they were just like, the Germans were just kind of like, okay, well, whatever, it's good to see you back. But when I came out of the military back to Athens, where I kind of grew up around this area, you know, a lot of my friends were just like, what was that like? You know, and a lot of it's like good intention, but you very much so feel like the other. You feel, you know, a lot of people ask the dumb question. The dumb question is, did you kill anybody? And I'm like, no, but I almost did. I very, very, very almost did. Like, this close. And I tell that story because I think that it's important for me to tell my stories. That's so inappropriate to ask. I feel like that's just it's not great, like but I also get it. Like, I understand people's curiosity because they want to know they want to have insight to something that is so extreme and so unbelievable. It's like you can't imagine how horrible it is, so you have to wrap your head around it. So I get it, but what the negative effect of that kind of line of dialogue and questioning is that people that have been through really bad traumatic things have to re-experience those things in their heads, and then B, they feel separate. It's like,
you're like a sideshow. You're like, you know,
and then and you're in your head going, okay, I'll tell the story, but I'm going to tell it this certain way for this person, because maybe if I say it this way, that's a little more honest, and more real and to the point, maybe they'll look at me differently, and I don't want to be looked at differently.
Yeah.
I'm not a monster. Like I was trained by the government to go fight and kill 100%. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not a bad person. I'm not a murderer or some horrific warmongering monster. But you get scared because you go to a party or a show or something, and it comes up, and you're like, okay, yeah, like here's like kind of this vibe of what this was like. But and then you go home and you go, oh, I really hope that person X doesn't think that I'm this like horrible creature, and and that can be really tough. It wasn't a big deal for me, but I've seen a lot of people, both in the military and like first response world, that deal with that very poorly, and it's really hard because they're not people like. For me, I don't know. At some point in my life, like my give a fuck switch got broken in that regard, like, and I just kind of was like, all right, if I will come as I am, and if you don't appreciate it, then I'm not for you, and that's fine. Then I'll just like I'll spend my attention and energy on other people.
Exactly.
But,
Fuck them.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same right, like we're social creatures. We don't want to feel like
I mean, that's death if you get ostracized, and
Yes.
that's how you survive. You don't have the tribe to survive.
Right.
That's dire. So we're wired to care.
Yeah. And that's why, like, right now, I have so much empathy for, like, the trans community, because there's so many people that are just trying to live their reality and just be who they are and just express their gender expression as they feel is best suited for them. And then you have, like, the literal government telling you that you are an aberration and that you are not, like, you are a mental illness or whatever. And then you have all these other people who are saying, kind of parroting this like bullshit. And, you're made out to be this like anomalous creature. And no wonder they have such high suicide rates. No wonder. It's like, it's the same, very different, but it's also kind of the same, neurological workings of like being a war veteran or being somebody who's been through trauma, because they're making this stuff such a big deal, and they're making these people out to be the other. And again, this is how this stuff works. It's like so many aspects of civilization, of the way that all of our American problems are because we just cannot talk to each other and understand each other on just such a basic level of saying, hey, this is just who I am. I don't expect you to even get it. I'm not wanting you to agree with me, but I want you to respect my existence of just who I am.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that drives me nuts. Like I see that all the time. We have a lot of fans that are in like, I'm bisexual and Emily's bisexual in the band. So we're very big advocates of the queer community, and we have a lot of fans that are trans, and I hear it all the time. They're just like so scared, and they're so like upset, and I'm like, I get it. I understand in a different way. I don't know your experience, but I know what it's like to come back or come into the world and publicly be like, hey, this is who I am, and people go, that's a little much. I don't like that doesn't align with my way of thinking. So you are a problem, and that's I think that's just disgusting. Like I think that's just so sad, when all these people want is just to like be who they are. But anyway.
No, absolutely. Again, with the inauthenticity, it just it's maddening if you can't if you feel like a shell of yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of this comes down to with not being able to live your truth, and
sorry, I'm ranting.
You're
now.
good.
I'm getting into rant mode.
Oh, it's okay.
If you can't tell, I go
That's
off the
totally
handle
fine.
sometimes.
My best friend gets on rants too, so it's okay.
Hell yeah.
And I'm here for it. I am here for it.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think you touched a lot on like your experiences on being a veteran and a firefighter, and you did say I was curious, like what drew you to those professions, and you mentioned your dad had been Army.
Yeah. You know, when you're a kid and you see your parents doing stuff
Yes.
like the military or you know firefighters or police, like whatever, um, I think you just sort of you have a very glamorized like reductive version of that for obvious
Mm-hmm.
reasons because your dad's not going to come home and be like, hey son, like I trained in a L-shaped ambush how to slaughter humans wholesale, with
Mm.
a machine gun that can fire 1,600 rounds a minute and an anti-tank rocket that can like they give you the well, I go and I train to fight bad guys so that you and mom and your sister can be safe. And you and like culture around military bases, like every movie that I watched when I was a kid, like anything that was, like action movies or whatever, it was like glamorizing that, it was like very,
Mm-hmm.
just that very oversimplified version of the military. But I mean, to be honest with you, like my dad was, I also saw the other half of it, which was that my dad got hurt really badly. He fucked his back up, which is ironic because I did too. Just
Dang.
now, not in the military, but it's all because of the army. But anyway, he got really badly hurt, and they were
Shit.
like, we don't think he's gonna walk again. And then they did the surgery, and he was okay. But
Good.
he's dealt with extreme back pain his whole life, multiple surgeries. And then he was diagnosed with a form of like stress-induced schizophrenia, called schizoaffective disorder, which I'm sure you probably know about being a psychology person. But so he was in hospitals like all the time for a very large, very formative part of my childhood. And he and I, like, we didn't not get along. He just wasn't there. He just was gone. And I think even at an early age, I was able to kind of recognize, like, I love my dad, and I loved him so much when I was a kid. I mean, he was my absolute hero.
Mm.
And anyway, sorry.
No,
Um,
this is yeah.
it's
Thank you for being vulnerable.
of course, yeah. It's really hard when you have this just ineffable hero, this godlike. I mean, my dad he was just, but I mean, he was a bodybuilder too. He was like Arnold Schwarzenegger size, like, and he was so handsome, and he was just such a gregarious, and he still is like these things. Maybe not buff and, but he's still handsome and he's still gregarious and he's still very much so himself. But I saw that for years, and then it turned into this. It was almost like a horror movie. He was just in the bedroom when he was home because he was in so much pain and he was doped up, and then he lost his mind and he turned into a different person, and it was just gone, and it was so painful because I was always like, where is dad? Like when he was in the hospitals for months at a time, I remember being a very young child just like asking my mom, where's dad? And she would tell me he's in the hospital, he's sick, and I was and it just didn't make sense. And I started to see the military as that's what it is. Like that's what caused this. Because I knew he was hurt, and I knew he was stressed out, and it, not maybe in such literal ways, but I understood in the way that children understand that this is where this is coming from. So I had a lot of like really adverse feelings to the military for a very long time.
Dang.
Like I was like,
Yeah.
I don't, like when the war started in like, so I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and I was in, freshman biology, and the announcement came over the PA, and I understood what was going on then, and I started to become a little more informed about the world, just reading, a lot of my own reading. And then, the war in Iraq started in 2003, and I really didn't understand that. It just felt like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? But it was being from a military family, I was just kind of like, well, maybe there is a reason for this, and maybe this is to make things safer, because look what did happen, where 3,600 or 700 people died in a single day in the most like awful kind of ways. So, it wasn't a major thing for me for a while. It wasn't like something that I was like, oh, I'm going to go join the army to go fight and, you know, kill and do all this stuff and like support America. I was pretty like, because of my childhood, I was kind of ambivalent about it. But then when I was 17, I dropped out of high school, and because I again, rural Georgia, schools in this country are based on property value. If you live in rural areas, the schools are shit because the money is not there. We had books from the 80s for science books. Like, it was a joke. I was like, I'm not learning anything. Everything I learned in high school, with very few exceptions, there were a couple teachers, but almost everything I learned in that time was because I read a lot. I read voraciously, like all the time. I was just reading and reading and reading. And so I dropped out of high school, and I started working in a car parts factory, and I had this like job at a movie theater from when I was 15, and I was working these jobs that were just like going nowhere. It was like I felt quite literally like a cog in a machine. I was just like, I am a function. I'm just like making this meager amount of money so that I can scrape by, and I was constantly struggling. So I started to go to like a technical school. I got a GED, went to technical school, but I was bad at it because I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have this drive to go, okay, I need to like study, and I need to make things happen for myself. And I don't know. I was working all the time. And again, I felt like I was in the system that was just like uncaring. And it wasn't about like actually learning or doing well or getting ahead. It was about like just sort of supporting the machinery of the system. So I started to kind of look at the military because I was like, I had this feeling. I was reading a whole bunch of like French existentialism literature, like Camus and Sartre and all this weird stuff from post-war France, where all these people were saying things like, you know, the meaning of a person is defined by the actions they take and the identity they create on their own terms. And that's who you are, is like what you manifest and what you create, and the decisions that follow you through your life. And so I started to see this like military thing as this, and a lot, and I'll say this right off the top. This was the hubris and the naivety of youth, was going, okay, if I join the army, I can go to this crazy challenging thing where I will feel like I did the hardest thing that I possibly could. And I know that it, you know, because of like talking to my dad, I was like, I know that they break you down and then they build you up and they build you into this stronger person. And they do 100%. Like, you can talk, there's so many things that I can talk shit about the military that are awful and bad. That is not one of them. They will make you stronger. If you make it, if you don't quit and you get to the end of basic training and your specialized training, if you get through that, if you have the mettle within you, which most people do, and you don't quit, you will be stronger and you will be more disciplined and you will be able to think more clearly and more concisely. And in that way, you'll be better. It's just for the wrong reasons. So I started to see that stuff, and I was like, I'm going to do it. So I did it. I went and I joined, and I started out enlisted in the Georgia National Guard, and I went through basic training and infantry school because I wanted the hardest possible job. I wanted to be a paratrooper, and I did that. I went to airborne school. I did all this crazy training, and then I got back to Georgia. And by then, though, I was kind of brainwashed, and because I had been trained to go fight. And you don't train to do something for the better part of a year and then just like sit around. So the wars were both raging. This is 2008 now. And again, super stupid, naive hubris of youth. But I wanted to go out there and see what it was all about. I wanted to go see, again, can I survive? Can I make it? Mm-hmm. But I also started to understand the power of that community, that closeness, that camaraderie that you only really feel when you're in a crazy situation where you can die at any minute. So I started to look into going active duty, and the easiest way for me to do that was to go become an officer. So I spent a couple years enlisted in the Guard, finished college, finally got through UGA and became an officer. Stayed in the infantry, and I took a rifle platoon of like 30, mostly kids, to Afghanistan, and we were in the city of Kandahar, and I mean, like, it was mostly a very tame experience. There were a couple moments of like utter complete terror and chaos, but most of it was just boring, and it was just like this thought constantly of like walking around this very like strange hostile city where you're like, oh, we could just be killed at any minute. I could take a step on a wrong place and step on a pressure plate IED and just be vaporized. Or more, or worse for me, one of my guys that are like 18-year-olds who have only seen basic training, Germany, Afghanistan. That's their adult experience. One of them gets killed. And these are good, just really good kids. They were so good. They loved each other. We all loved each other so much. It's such a different thing. Just knowing, like, I'll die for. I mean, like, still to this day, if one of those kids was walking down the street and somebody held a gun to their head and said, "You or them," I'm going. It's me, without hesitation. Any one of those kids, because that's what happens. But so anyway, the whole thing was there's. It's not one of those things that I can look back on and go, oh, this was like a bad experience or a good experience. It's like everything in life. There's gray area to most of it. And my problem with it really comes into play where we are hidden away in kind of plain sight from the reality of, like, why, for example, the war on terror lasted for 20 years while it yielded so little results that were meaningful, when we could have kind of decided, hey, we're not affecting change in this region that we've effectively destabilized. We need to get out of here and let these people kind of figure their own pathway forward. Because it only progressed because the military-industrial complex was making a shit ton of money off of war. And that's what always happens. It's happening right now in Ukraine. Like, I fully support the Ukrainian people, but we have all this espouse, like, oh, support Ukraine, help these people. But these companies are making shit tons of money off of this war. And that's how it works. That's how they perpetuate it. That's why we will continue to go to war, for the most like nebulous, unknown reasons. That we're bombing people in countries that we've never even probably heard of or know how to point to on a map, let alone. So, I just when you become educated about it and then you see it firsthand, it takes on a totally different reality where you're like, oh wow, this is literal evil. This is it. Because war in and of itself is evil, because it's people killing each other on behalf of people telling them to do it because they have to or else. But what's even worse than that is the profiting off of that. That is literal evil manifest. And because it's so repulsive to me in every way. It's just so like it is so removed from the reality of what it is making the money off of, and that's just crazy.
Yeah, so, totally perverse incentives, really.
Right.
That could be a song.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting, really. Wow. Shit. Yeah. No, thank you for all that insight. I feel like I'm, always learning more about it. Like, yeah.
It's a lot. And it's such a weird system. And again, it's like, there's gray area though, right? Again. And I think that it's important for people to recognize that, like, especially in Afghanistan, like, women and femme-presenting people in Afghanistan, without the Taliban, they had a future. They had jobs, they had a life, they had education. They had the ability to be in the public sphere. Now they are fucked. Like, they are, all women all over that country are non-entities. They are not publicly allowed to do anything. Like, you literally cannot, as a woman, you cannot walk down the street without either your husband, your father, one of your husband's male relatives. If you're just a woman walking down the street in that country now that the Taliban is running it again, you will be put to death. They don't care. It is such a hyper form of religious zealotry that has no place in this world. But again, it's a gray area because it's like we've proven that we couldn't handle that. We couldn't, because that's like, I guess my problem with the way that war and the military works now is those wars for that 20-year period, it was never about honestly making a difference, because if that's what it was about, it would have been done way into the aughts. It would have been between the years of 2001 and 2010. We would have wrapped that thing up and been like, see you later. It was always about making money for corporations, and it was always about padding officers like within the military. It was about boosting their ability to go, hey, look what I did. Look at all this, like when you're an officer in the army and in the military in general, you do an annual evaluation report and you literally list all the things you did, and they would just make shit up. And that's like what the Afghan government did. They were totally corrupt. And then the U.S. military would be like, oh, we secured this much ground. We killed this many insurgents. We did all this stuff. And it was all bullshit because it wasn't, like, some of it actually wasn't happening. And the stuff that was happening was inflated and wasn't actually providing security. It wasn't making change. So, it was all just lies. And that's where we have to change this stuff, is we have to keep accountability, and we have to keep, like, war has to be the absolute last result, and in defense of our nation, literally here, or in defense of people that are being committed atrocities against, like straight genocide. Like we have, we have, I think, a moral obligation to that, but we don't do that. It happens over and over and over and over again for the past 90 years or I guess 80 years or whatever that we've been like one of the largest superpowers. There are so many atrocities that are committed, straight genocides that are committed across the world, and we just go, not my problem. Sudan, not my problem. Bosnia, not my. We did a little bit there, but mostly not my problem. It's happening in Burma right now. It's happening in China and places. There's so many crazy things where we're just like, oh, sorry. So that like selective, savior complex that we have is such a bankrupt bullshit thing too. Anyway, I'm sorry.
We'll be your savior for a profit.
Right. If we can figure out a way to make money off of it, we'll be there. But otherwise, maybe not. Yeah.
So corrupt.
Yeah.
Absolute corruption. It reminds me of I'm overhearing some of the stuff my husband's listening to about Russia, and just how total mismanagement of equipment and everything, because everybody's just kind of checking in and they don't really have the support. It's just
Oh, they will lose that war because it's the same shit as but hyper magnified from what we just did. They have all these oligarchical implanted military commanders who are just straight up kind of lying. They're like, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that. And the only reason why they're still holding it together is because it's such a huge amount of people. But I mean, eventually, it's not sustainable because it's all predicated on lies and bullshit, and that's, Anyway.
Yep. And people saying we're all good, or the thing got done, and it's almost like Chernobyl. It's like nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong.
Oh yeah. They have a track record of that, obviously.
Oh my God, terrifying.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Thank you for such a wealth of information and insight and perspective with all your experiences.
Thanks. It's. I mean, I just think it's high time that veteran voices are the ones telling people the truth about these realities, because I see it so often. I'm not politically oriented to any party. I don't like. I think the Republicans are truly awful right now, but the Democrats are not much better.
Yeah.
It's like
the far left, man.
it's there's so many like incredibly negative, malignant things going on both sides, and a lot of it's on purpose to keep you distracted away from the reality of the middle line of what's going on. But you know,
The polarization of everything.
yeah, I just think it's time that like especially veterans start speaking up against the abuse of these systems, because if like some say 21-year-old political science major at Harvard or whatever, like really really insanely well educated, or let's say a 25-year-old PhD political science major at Harvard is getting their doctorate, and they know all the ins and outs, and they know the insane amount of history and all this stuff that goes behind this stuff. If they get on the internet and say, hey, the military-industrial complex is maybe the most harmful thing to American freedom and democracy, and here's why. All these redneck idiots that are so far right, and they're so far up, like people like Trump and DeSantis' ass, that they can only see what's like parroted, and they just regurgitate talking points. They will go, oh, you're just like a liberal fucking idiot, whatever. You just don't care about our troops. You don't care about freedom and democracy. You're just a communist. It's like the same dumb, like non-thinking Cro-Magnon, like knuckle-dragging bullshit. But if a veteran comes up and says, hey, I was there, I have the education, I know about XYZ, and y'all need to pay attention, the people that they supposedly kind of worship, they have to go, ah, shit. And I've had conversations literally in person with people like that, and go, where were you during the war? Did you go there? Did you see it? Do you have insight and education, like in the history of what's going on in Afghanistan? No? Okay. Listen to the people that know what the fuck they're talking about, because that really matters. It really does. And then, but that's like, you know, there's such a minority of soldiers that are comfortable with talking about it, because you know, again, you gotta put yourself out there, and it's really tough. It can be really hard, and you're up for scrutiny, especially on the internet. And it's just like,
absolutely. Yeah, you can't win. You can't, you know, give insight, but then people don't want to hear it. They can't handle the truth, as they say. Right.
Yep. I truly believe that's why a lot of vets don't go against that narrative, that the narrative being, we love America, we are here to support and defend it, we will fight and die for any reason, like, you know, just that typical like thing that you hear about, like, from just a lot of soldiers, because I mean, it is kind of just brainwashed. It's just like, I am a non-thinking entity that is just going along with the orders, and I, you know, and I just sort of regurgitate like what I'm told and what I hear, and that's it. So, you know, it's just scary to put yourself out there, because, and again, it's not just the scrutiny of those very right-leaning people, it's the far left too. Because when you're out there, that's when you get the whole like, oh, you're just like, oh, this is the shit right here. So to kind of bring this back to the music world, recently there was this whole Reddit thread about me, which is like very flattering, but it was this like, this person just got on there, was like, I cannot stand that like Dusty from Vision Video Goth Dad guy. Every time I see his face, I feel repulsed, and I just hate how cringy he is, and and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But then they started to dig into like my military history, and they were like, oh, he's always talking about like, you know, leftist stuff and like progressive stuff, but you know, he also has this like they dug in and found my my old personal Instagram, which is like my old DJ name. I used to go by DJ War Daddy, which is literally the reason why that name is when I first got out of the service, I just kept it high and tight for a long time, but then I started to grow my hair on the top, like really long. So there's this movie Fury where Brad Pitt plays a tank commander at the end of World War II, and they call him, like, his nom de guerre, his like war name was War Daddy. And my friend was like, oh, you look just like War Daddy from Fury. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And I like that movie because it's very anti-war. It shows how awful that war became at the end, and just how bitter, and how these men became creatures. They became just nasty, awful, reductive versions of themselves. But anyway, like, so it was like a duality thing. It was like a bit of irony, and like it was sort of cheeky. But like there was also this picture of me at a squadron ball in my cavalry regiment that I was in, and it's like my friend Eric and I, and we're just like drunk idiots, like in our dress blue uniforms. And I had posted this like that night while we were drunk, and it was just like, we're sexy death machines. Like, it's such a dumb, like, I'm like, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm like making fun of like those idiots that are like,
you're parodying, it's satire. Yeah.
Like, I literally took, like, this is before I was out as bi, but I literally took Eric, because this is right after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. I took Eric as my official date to the squadron ball, and he's just like one of my best friends, but you know, not at all romantically. Eric's not my type at all, but I literally took him, and you, I'm sure you've probably with your husband being former military, like, you know, at the balls, like, there's the receiving line, so you have like the commander and their spouse, and like the sergeant major and their spouse, and then all the like staff officers, and you have to like introduce your date or your spouse to the commander. So you go through and you're like, "Hi, sir, this is my date, Eric. He's also in this regiment, in this squadron." And they were like, "What are you doing, Gannon?" I'm like, "He's my date. You can't do anything about it." And they were like, and it was funny, but it was also like, we were just obnoxious. Like, that was post-war. So I took him through the receiving line, and there's like actually a picture. They have like those cheesy like prom photo booth, like with a backdrop. And we like have a picture together where we're like hugging, like middle school dance. And it was just so stupid. But anyway, like that picture, and it was literally just me like making fun of all these like idiot, like, "Oh, we're like fucking badass motherfucker, like we'll go kill you know, just all this dumb, hollow bullshit." And they used that as like, "Look at him, he's a monster, like he glamorizes war, and he's a proudly imperialist," and like, and I was like, dude, y'all have no concept. Like, listen to half of the first record, especially, it's all like staunchly anti-war, and it was just so funny to me. But like, again, to me, it's whatever. Like, I'm on the internet now, and I don't give a fuck. Like, I actually welcome trolls, because they're just feeding into the algorithms, pushing. Like, when you comment or interact with any of the shit that I put online, you're just helping me.
Absolutely.
And I won't like get into like arguments with them anymore, but I'll like get on there and I'll just be like, "Hey, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for coming by. Also, thank you for engaging with my content, because it helps me a lot. So continue to comment. I'm totally here for it. Just keep viewing that video, whatever." But anyway, like, a lot of people that aren't used to this kind of world that I live in now, where everything I do is kind of publicly available. Like, I live a very public life now because of the amount of followers that we have, and I'm constantly just posting like just normal stuff. But I'm also like very aware of like when I'm in public, like a lot of like I was at a gas station in Ohio at a Love's gas station, and the girl at the register was like, "Do I know you?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And she's like, "You're on TikTok, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "You're Goth Dad." And I was like, "Yeah." So I live a very public life, and there's a lot of really weird things that come with that. And just being out there and putting yourself out there in a very public way that are not good. So when veterans have to put their voices out there, it can be really jarring, especially at first, when you start to say, "Hey, I have something to say about this, and I have the experience to back it up, and I think y'all should listen." That amount of hate and nastiness and vitriol that explodes at you is like scary, and it can be like a little much, especially if something like if you're say posting something on TikTok and it goes viral. That's scary sometimes.
Right.
Like, people are like, "I will come find you and kill you," and
right.
You're like,
death
what?
threats,
Like,
doxing, like,
oh god, it's so crazy. So, but I think we have a responsibility as people who, like, for veterans especially, people who don't agree with what we were put through, we have an onus to, like, tell our stories and make our voices heard so that people know that we have to avoid these pitfalls from happening again. It's, like, so important.
Well
so
said.
It's scary, but it's vital.
Dang. What is it, like, great power comes great responsibility, and it's, if you're holding back, then it's how many is it going to harm to, like, not
right exactly
to not speak up. Shoot. Yeah. Wow. You mentioned Goth Dad, and I did want to ask, like, how you came, what inspired Goth Dad for you? Like, how did you come about that?
It's kind of silly. Like, so the quintessential part of it, or I guess the literal part of it, happened when, so I write, like, these things that I call scratch tracks, where I'm just writing music. I'll write a guitar riff, put it to a drum machine, and then I'm trying to develop, like, a vocal melody. So I'll just kind of, like, make nonsense words, or like silly, like, stories or whatever, or I'll, like, just say, like, just make up stuff. And
just playing again, it can actually come to a lot of great discoveries.
Right. It's kind of like stream of consciousness. And one day I was writing this little song, and I was like, just trying to figure out how are the vocals to the sound. And for some reason, I just, like, this image of this goth dad popped into my head, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if there was this, like, hyper wholesome, like, 50s style dad, but he was also just, like, ultra goth, like, and knew his shit, like, wasn't just, like, in appearance. It was, like, a fan of, like, The Cure and Bauhaus, and, like, knew the stuff. And so I made that little video, because I recorded this song. It was like, Goth Dad, slightly embarrassing, but still kind of cool.
Yes.
Yeah, and I showed it to Dan, and he's like, dude, that's hilarious. He's like, you should post that. And I was like, okay.
Fantastic.
So I put it online, and it just went crazy. Like, people just were like, but the thing that was wild to me was that people were like, well, what does he do? And I was like, what do you mean, what does he do? They're like, this is like a character, right? And I was like, oh shit. And I have a background in, like, theater. I was a theater kid in high school, and I've always been super into, like, film and cinema and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, yeah, like, let me just try to flesh this out a little bit. So I started doing, like, goth dad jokes and little act outs and little skits and stuff, and it just really resonated. But I mean, I don't think that I was, like, succinctly aware of, like, where it was coming from while I was creating it. But now it's like, go figure. And, like, it's kind of like looking back at my dad. My dad, he's an amazing guy, and we have a great relationship now. But he was also gone a lot, and he was absent. So I remember wanting to have that father figure back, and wanting that, like, masculine support that's kind but strong and very stable and firm, but is also, like, silly and like let's go on adventures, let's do this crazy stuff, let me show you how to do things. And so I value that a lot. And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, there was, like, a time when I first started to do the goth dad stuff where I was kind of like, I mean, it was blowing up, and it was, like, bringing us a lot of attention for the band, and that helped a lot. But I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this forever, because it is very purposefully camp and cheesy and, like, just super, like, cringy and ridiculous. It's on purpose, because that's what your parents are. They're like, your parents make you go, oh God. My dad is the master of awful jokes. He tells thousands of them every day, and 99% of them are awful, but every once in a while he'll just nail it, and you're just like, oh my God, that's so funny. But you almost don't want to laugh, because you're like,
don't encourage
I don't want to egg this on. Like, don't encourage him. But I started, like, when we started to tour, I started to see that, like, a lot of people were like, hey, that video, it's kind of the same with the songs. They'd be like, hey, I know it's silly, but your Goth Dad videos really comfort me, and they really make me feel a little bit better about being queer, or being trans, or being weird, or being whatever, or just having a bad day, or going through a breakup, or a death, or what, all these different things. And now for me, it's like, okay, like, I really enjoy it now. I mean, it's hard to always do and balance the musician thing and the goth dad stuff, because the goth dad stuff takes me a long time to come up with and think of, and not just like bullshit. It's like, here's a video. I want it to be meaningful, and I want it to be like creative and funny. But yeah, I'm super grateful to be like the internet goth dad. It's fun, I get to connect with a lot of really beautiful, kind, genuine people who need that small thing. Again, it's all the small little things. It's not about, I have no delusions that I'm like making massive change through one video about how to tie a tie or whatever. But if it helps somebody learn that cool thing, that's a pain in the ass to learn anyway, but does it in a gentle, compassionate, and kind way of showing, hey, there are men here in this world that are not toxically masculine, that have. I think when I get into arguments online a lot about what is positive masculinity, and I always tell people it's being kind and compassionate, being strong through kindness and compassion. Not being strong through aggression and violence and punching down. It's about building people up and providing foundations and stabilities in order to. Gizmo wants to say hi.
Oh, Gizmo! Oh my God, he looks unreal. He almost looks CGI. Makes me want to bring Persephone.
Yeah, he's like, I want to be seen. Yeah, he's a good boy.
This is spooky boy.
Yeah, he's such a good one. But that's like why I like doing it. And once I kind of realized and recognized that stuff, it's like, okay, here's an opportunity for people to see somebody who has been in these like very like aggressive alpha male dominated industry, or not industry, but worlds like the military and the fire department, but who's really good at doing eyeliner and like enjoys, sensitive things and art and, things that are,
and can be nurturing. There's like a real nurturing.
Exactly. So I love doing it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're fantastic at it. Like, you have such a sincerity and genuineness that I think a lot of us who have strained relationships with my father, Freudian slip. I was gonna say I myself do, and
thank you.
That's why I did reach out to you on Cameo, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this for myself. I need a pep talk, and I mean, sorry, we can take this out if it's not.
That's okay. No, it's totally fine. I'm good with all of it.
Cool. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was, interesting timing that, I was like, I feel like he just seems like somebody that gets it with the artistry of everything and the creative process. And I was like, maybe he would have some direction for me. And so, and you did up the whole thing and like, really had like such great wisdom, and it's probably, like surprised that like within a few months I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast. I'm gonna do a spooky podcast, and then I have my other stuff that it takes time.
Right,
it takes time to develop. As you know with Goth Dad, and I was wondering like if you think like you right now are very focused with the music because you got the tours coming up, but you're great at comedy too. There's like just so much that so many aspects there. That is just amazing on the fact that you write it, you like create the image, and I was wondering if you think you'd like to do more comedy and maybe even go into acting, and you did say
I mean, I've done I did Sven Gulli, which is like a horror movie host in Chicago. I went and did that show. So they have like an after show for Sven Gulli called it's like Sven Tooney. And it's like Late Night with Sven Tooney, and it's a puppet version of Sven Gulli, and it's really funny. It's like super hilarious, and they have all these like characters. Some of them are like people, some of them are puppets. So the ones that I interacted with was Sven Tooney, the puppet version of Sven Gulli, and then Trevor, who is he's this zombie teenager who died in an explosion of a video store in the 80s, so he's just sort of stuck in the 80s.
That's fantastic.
And it's super fun. It's hilarious. It's just like really campy and fun. but
And so this was like stage performance there, or like
so this was like for a TV show. It's for the
like a
MeTV.
local. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's broadcast. It's affiliated like throughout several states, but it's mostly in
I've
Chicago.
heard of Svengoolie. I know.
Yeah, and
Svengoolie,
it was super fun, and I really enjoyed it. That was like my first time on like TV, like where it was like full production studio, and you know it was totally different from like me turning on a phone and being like, "Oh, hi there, baby bat," you know, like where it's like in the comfort of my own home, and it was a little uncomfortable because I was so like out of sync with how that world works because I haven't operated in that environment, that it was, yeah, it took me a minute to like figure out like how to wrap my head around it. But once I got comfortable with it, I was like, oh, this is really fun. This is really cool. And I had a great time. So anyway, I don't know that I'll ever expressly like get into that like in a way that's my primary objective, but I'm not like closed to the opportunities if they're afforded. Like, you know, like I've always joked with Dan, like our bass player, he and I run the band administratively. We do all like the business stuff, and we've always kind of joked about like, oh, one day like maybe like Netflix will have like a Goth Dad show or something. But like honestly though, like one thing that I kind of do want to do with Goth Dad is less content that's like, there's only so many videos I can make where I'm like, oh, hi there, baby bat. You had a bad day. Let me make you this spooky treat or whatever. And those are fun, and I like those. But I want to get into something. I have this idea for this show that's like kind of a longer form content show that would be on like, say, YouTube and then maybe further. But it's more of like kind of, for lack of a better term, like a variety show where I'm like the host.
Variety shows.
You know, yeah, where it's like,
I really wish we had more of them.
It's crazy. We don't have a lot, but that's like that curation that we need, and so it would be like kind of me and maybe a character to go in like, oh, hi there, baby bats, it's your Goth Dad. Welcome to Goth Dad's Spooktacular Hour, whatever. You know, I don't know, whatever working name. Today I'm going to show you some really wacky stuff, but first of all, let's get weather from so-and-so, and then it's like some dumb bit, and then I'm like, all right, so I don't know if you've ever heard of this artist from Michigan, but here, I want to show you this short film from this horror movie director, this low budget, it's terrible, it's cheesy, but it's wonderful and awesome. Here we go, take it away. And I show stuff like that, and then I show music, and I show art and comedians and just like anything, you know, I want to do that. But the hardest part is like finding the time to do that. It's like so hard. So
it would be an undertaking.
Ideally, right. I want to find somebody that wants to like champion that kind of concept and make it happen, because I don't have the time to like go edit and do all this shit on my own. I want to show up to a studio with some people, like
put
shoot
in your
it,
costume,
and then give it to somebody, and then go, y'all like make that happen.
Like a goth SNL or like a spooky SNL.
Right. Ooh. There's something cool there that could happen.
I think
but
that'd be so cool.
You know, everything in the creative world, especially with TV and movie, is like it's all about this like network. And you know, that's like one of those things, like I know a few people, but you know, the music thing is absolutely my priority. So
of course,
it's so hard to like balance it. But like, you know, one day I think there's definitely a conceivable end to Vision Video where I'm like, I don't want to tour the rest of my life. So maybe 10 years from now, you know, when I'm 46, I can absolutely do something like that where I'm sitting on a couch going, oh, hey, welcome to Goth Dad's ridiculous hour of fun, you know, and still enjoy like being part of a creative process without having to like kill myself.
The physical, the strain.
Yeah, touring is hard.
And performing like that, you know, giving it like real good performance. No, absolutely.
Yes.
No, yeah, that would be. I love that. Like, Goth Dad Spooky Hour or something like that would be fantastic. Right. I mean, people would. I need that to exist personally. I think a lot of people do.
I'll do my due diligence.
But first, I think, music. Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing for us right now is just sort of building sustainability and stability to what we do as a band. And I think we're pretty close to that. You know, like we're paying the bills. Like, I mean, I'm not living lavishly by any circumstance, nor do I care about that. But there also has to be like a future to things, you know. So once I feel like things are a little bit more stable and less like feast or famine, then you know, I could absolutely see myself doing something like that, like getting fully into that, and that being so much fun, because that just sounds like hilarious and a blast. So, yeah, keep an eye out, you know. I'll have you on the show. We'll
that would be fun. Stuff. That would be super fun. Yeah, I mean, or if Goth Dad, like, yeah, he's a dad and everything, but what if he, you know, was also in a goth band, and that could be like a lot of like, it would be kind of like Kelly Clarkson, her show. She'll like sing a song to start and then close it out with a song. There's like ways to kind of integrate things, but yeah, I love the variety show. Like, honestly, time and time again, I'll like lament to myself, like, why don't we have variety shows or more variety shows? And yeah, is Gizmo still around? He's like, his little
he's
head
running around. He's exploring. This is a brand new environment to him, being at my partner's house, because I've been transplanted from my house. Because for those of you that don't know, my house got destroyed by a improperly
evil
installed dishwasher.
Oh,
so my whole floor is getting ripped up, and I'm here, but it's all good, you know. There's a bunch of cats running around, and they're all having a good time.
How many cats do you have? I know you have.
Yeah, I have 4 altogether. I have 1 outdoor mostly, and then 3 indoor. But my partner has 3 here. So there are 5 cats in this house right now. My 2 other cats are with my sister. Just 7 cats was like, that's too many for this house. So,
yeah, that's how many litter boxes? Like 4?
Yeah, it's a lot. But it's fun. They're doing well.
Do they get along, or they just kind of stay out of each other's way?
Growl, my outside cat, he's here in a room locked away. He does not like any other cats. Gizmo loves everybody. And then her cats, Gizmo. 2 of them are real sweet, and one of them is kind of standoffish, but she's okay. She's just like, she's not to be bothered, but she's not like aggressive or anything. Okay. Whereas Growl, like, he has to stay. Yeah, here he is again. Growl has to stay like behind closed doors because he's just a grumpy old man. So
I love how ragdoll he gets when you pick him up.
Yeah, he's just like, he doesn't care. He's just so chill. He'll just lay there, just like whatever.
This is a good boy.
Yeah.
Aw, Gizmo. I love that you named him after What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah,
Guillermo
his full
Gizmo.
name. Yeah, his full name is Guillermo Gizmo Argento. So it's like all horror, all spooky stuff.
Argento, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but he has like, you know, like every other cat, he has like 50 actual names that we use on a day-to-day basis. So
no. Like I have a dog, Persephone, Greek goddess of the underworld, consort to Hades. But I call her doo-doos, poo-poos, boo-boos. All sorts of things that are not her name.
Right. Yeah. It's like, who knows if they even respond to that? They're like, the human is talking again, I guess. Yes. I should probably come over there. I don't know.
This might mean a treat. I will pay attention.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And then I was going to say, so you are going on tour very soon.
Yes. Oh, yes. Tuesday.
Oh, my God. Jeez. Okay. How long of a tour are you going to be doing? A month?
So this is our first like iteration into Europe, which is exciting. We ended up with not so many shows in continental Europe because specifically there's this big festival called Wave Gothic Treffen happening in Leipzig. It's sort of the largest goth and post-punk festival in the world. And we are playing on the main stage on the Sunday of that. So very exciting. We actually start that night, the whole night off. So we're like kind of first up, which is cool. Like festivals are weird. Like if you're in the middle of a lineup, sometimes it's not great. So it's really good to be the last or the first. Or at least like somewhere in that prime, you know, there's that chunk of time where it's like, you know, but I mean, all festivals are a little different, but I'm happy that we're like the first off because it'll be like exciting. We kind of start that night off at like 5:30. So if you're at Wave Gothic Treffen, 5:30 on the 28th Sunday, at Agra Hall. But we're playing a couple shows leading up to that. We're playing like right outside of Brussels and Charleroi. We're playing Paris, and we're playing Vienna. So
Very
3 shows.
cool. Ooh, Veen.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm excited to just travel around Europe again a little bit. We have a lot of time off, which is nice. But
So
then,
good.
yeah, I mean, we're just gonna see so many cool spots. But we'll also be flying after WGT. We'll be flying up to the UK, and that is to support the March Violets, the famous like goth band who wrote the song Snake Dance, which a lot of people are familiar with. If you've ever been to a goth night, I guarantee you've heard the song. Go check it out. They're really amazing. Tom Ashton is the guitarist. He actually produced our first 2 records and recorded them. He's like a really good friend of ours, and he's toured with us like extensively for the last year and a half. He's been our like touring bass player. So we'll be opening for them for 9 different shows, and then we'll be playing 1 or 2 on our own, and that'll be between May 31st and June 10th. That will be in the UK. So just keep an eye out, and you know, we have our website. It's visionvideoband.com. You can find the links to all the tickets and dates there. But yeah, I'm
And
just excited.
we'll keep it in. We'll put it in the bio or in the description
Awesome.
and all that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get the links.
But
I think
yeah.
you have them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the UK. It's like such a warm and inviting place, so I'm very excited to play there.
Yeah, I love the UK. I'm jealous. You're going and you're going to Brussels. You're going to
Yes.
Germany and Wien.
It's so,
yeah.
It's gonna be great. It's a lot of traveling.
Yes, but it's good that you have downtime.
Yes, very
tight.
much so. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's like the Europe stuff will be nice because we have like we can get kind of our toes in
Like
the water
breathing
with it. We're
room
not-
and
yeah,
stuff.
we're not just like going nuts into like a 30-day tour, but we're also going to be back in Europe in November on a more like extensive kind of normal tour where we do like the 30 days, you know, or 30 dates within like a 4 or 5 week period. So, you know, that'll be announced like pretty soon as well.
Awesome.
And then also when we get back this summer, we'll be going back out to the West Coast. So in August, actually,
my
like
town.
in 10 days from now, on the 22nd of May, we'll be announcing our West Coast tour. And we have like a ton of dates with Urban Heat, who will be supporting us, which is a great band out of Austin, Texas. And yeah, it's just going to be like a really cool run. A lot of dates in Texas and a lot of dates up the West Coast. So just, you know, keep an eye out for that. That's going to be super fun. We love the West Coast. Like it's been such a great place to tour for us. Just really wonderful scenes, wonderful venues, and just cool people. All, you know, there's just something in the water, something in the air out there. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
it's more
you
chill.
did Bar Sinister at one point, I think you
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was wild. That was crazy. It was just like such a fun time. Like we flew out there for just one weekend to play that show and then flew
Shoot.
back, and it was just like it was just so much fun. I mean, that place is just nuts.
Nice.
If you've been there, you know exactly what we're talking about.
No, yeah, I'm excited to hear about your West Coast because I'm going to make that happen. 'Cause
Yes,
I've
yeah,
yet to see you
definitely.
live.
It'll be fun. It's we put on a hell of a show. There's a lot of things that I like wonder like if I do well or not, and putting on a show is not one of them. I know that we are fun and we do a good job live, so it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, from what I have seen online, you're like really great at like being present, which is the most important thing I think when you're doing live performance. Again, connecting. So,
Right.
you know, and yeah, you're very like great like crowd participation and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think
I try
that's
to
what
make it
really
fun.
makes it.
Yeah, I mean, I hate it. You know, there's some bands that can really get away with not saying much and being very like mysterious and ominous. But it's almost like an act. You know, it's like putting on a play or something. If you're gonna go the route of dark and spooky and mysterious, it has to be like spot on, because if you don't have that suspension of disbelief, it's really cheesy. And a lot of bands try it, and it does, and especially in the goth like post-punk world, and it just doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, you know, and it's also kind of boring to me sometimes, because it's just like people just standing there in like a cloud of fog with strobe lights and stuff, and that's cool or whatever. But like, I just don't feel connected to it. I don't feel like I'm experiencing something that's like giving me any value. I'm not like gonna walk away going like, that was so cool because like I loved it when he said this, or like, you know, when they were like really going nuts on that one song and they're running around. Like I like that visceral, crazy sort of active participation in what's going on in front of me. That I feel more connected to that. But that, you know, it's just personal taste. Some people like the like spooky cloud of fog around the band, and they're just sort of lost in the mystery of it, and that's totally fine and valid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not for me. So I like to put on the show that I would want to see.
Exactly. That's what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, do it for you, and then you know the right ones will be there.
Right.
And you're seeing The Cure, right?
Yes. Oh God, I'm so excited. We got second row seats for Atlanta, and I'm just like, I saw them once in 2016, and it was like, it was absolutely amazing. So I'm just so excited to see them again. They are every bit as good. Have you seen them live before?
No, I haven't.
Are you going to see them?
I will. I have to.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it's every bit as good as you think it will be. I mean, I'm serious. It's like Robert Smith is so endearing and like funny. He doesn't say a lot, but he's just really cute and weird. And you can tell he's just having a blast, and like just they're just so they are just really pure musicians, and most importantly, they're amazing live. Like it sounds exactly how it sounds on the record. It's just like spot on. I mean, it helps to be, you know, in a multi-million-dollar arena with like world-class audio technicians and stuff, but they are just phenomenal musicians, and they do what they love in such a pure way, and it's just so much fun to watch them. And they play for like 3 hours.
Oh shoot! Why?
Yeah, they play so long. I mean, I don't know about this tour, but like 2016 they played 34 songs. I was like, damn, dude, they played the entirety of Disintegration, like most of 17 Seconds, a good bit of Wish. It was just like, holy shit, this is crazy good. So yeah, I'm excited. My running joke is like, my dad joke about The Cure right now is like, it'll be great and it'll be fun, but it's going to be embarrassing when I get kicked out because Robert Smith is like tired of listening to me actively sob in the second row, and he's just like, that guy's gotta go. Get rid of him.
Get him out. Yes, he's like, I think I know you. It's the Goth dad.
Yeah, you're that wanker from the internet. Yeah, something like that. I'll be like, oh, at least you spoke to me.
It's kind of like when you and Emily did Bussin', and then Tears for Fear, they knew it. You're like, they know you for that.
Oh my God, I still haven't lived that down to Emily because I thought it was funny. She was mortified because Tears for Fears is
I
like
thought it was great.
To me, it's hilarious. Tears for Fears is like one of her favorite bands of all time. Likewise, but she was like, I cannot believe that is like how they presumably
They're gonna know
saw
her for
me.
it. Yes.
I was like, dude, don't worry about it. I mean, it's funny, you know. Like they
It's
thought
funny.
it was funny
They probably
enough
love
to
it.
repost it. Yeah, it was
They probably
like a
love
joke.
it.
So yeah, that was such a. We did that in a green room of a venue in Baltimore at the Metro Gallery, and I was like, hey, let's do that stupid like meme. Because we saw it in like a meme format. I was like, let's just sing that like choir, like choral. And she was like, oh, that'd be kind of funny. And I mean, I never thought in a million years that would pop off. That thing got seen like 1,000,000 times. I was like, dude, this is... Well, and what was funny though was that the video of us singing did well, but it didn't actually go crazy. The video of me showing her that they saw it and reposted it is what went crazy. That one blew up, and then the other one popped off because of that. And it was just like the dominoes falling of her embarrassment. And like Emily is like my little sister, you know. That's like kind of, a lot of people are like, oh, are you guys dating? I'm like, no, my partner is Scarlett and she's wonderful. Emily is very much so. We have a very like very close sibling kind of relationship, where I am very much so like kind of a big brother. You know, I have like that kind of, you know, I get onto her a lot, and I'm like trying to keep her in line, but we also joke around and like
and
fuck
teasing,
around a lot.
but like
we are always getting into like craziness. Like on tour, it's like usually me and her just getting into wild shit, and
Spooky shenanigans.
Yeah, and it's just it was so like just satisfying to watch her get so embarrassed by this thing that was just like such a dumb thing, because she doesn't really participate in the social media stuff as much. Like she does some, but it's
there's traps.
Yeah. I for me, I'm like, I don't force the social media stuff upon the rest of the band, because it's very obnoxious and it can be like really not fun, and
you have to enjoy it. For
me, it's like whatever. I just post like dumb things that I do now, and it's
people like
whatever.
it.
Yeah, but for them it's like very alien, so I don't make them jump through the same hoops that I do. But every once in a while I do, and
you'll rope them
in
into
those
yours.
Situations they get really upset, and it's kind of funny.
Aww. But all in good fun, hopefully.
Right. She wasn't like actually upset.
Distraught.
Like,
I'm going to go goth for a few days
like,
in my room. Just a little like mortified, but not,
Right. Because worse things could happen.
Absolutely. Oh, and I was going to ask if you have any like must-have creature comforts when you're on tour.
This is going to
like
sound
food
really
or drink
gross.
The goblin, trash goblin.
Yeah,
activate.
100%. So
me too, though.
I'm a vegetarian. I'm not vegan because I love dairy, but I'm vegetarian. And one of the things on the road that's really hard when you're out there is like just eating as a vegetarian or a vegan is like so hard. It's just such a pain in the ass. Because I mean, eating in general is hard on tour, but then you add like restrictions, and you're like, shit, I can't find anything. It's just like food deserts, especially in the Midwest. There's just no options, or they're like not good. Honestly, one of the biggest things is getting enough protein on the road, because like we put a lot of physicality into our performance, and you get worn out really quick if you don't get enough protein. I don't know why this is a thing, but I'm really glad it is. Love's gas stations always have like hard-boiled eggs, and I will eat so many hard-boiled eggs on the road, because it's like I like eggs, and they're healthy and
convenient,
they're full of and they're convenient, like,
and protein.
Easy,
yes,
and they're full of protein. So I eat a lot of hard-boiled eggs, which is just like kind of gross in a way, I guess, but it's that's one of them. They make this like Beyond Jerky now. That's like really good. It's like pea protein, and it's actually, honestly, I used to love jerky. Like I used to eat so much beef jerky. It's so good. Honestly, I like the Beyond Jerky better than the real jerky. It's like consistent too. Every single bag is exactly the same. There's no like some jerky is like it's like really stringy. It's not like good meat cuts. It's like bad. This stuff is the same every single time. So that's like been my jam. And then like Gatorade Zero, just a ton of Gatorade, just staying hydrated as much as possible. And trying to think of anything else that I like. Peanut M&Ms.
Those are amazing.
Yeah,
I love peanut M&Ms.
Yeah. Or the they have like cookie M&Ms. They're crunchy.
I think I've had
crispy.
that.
Oh, those are the jam.
Those are really good. Yeah. It's good. Yeah, good. We got some candy in there too. I was hoping for a little.
You gotta treat yourself.
Yes.
Because like I always end up losing like about 10 pounds on like month-long tours, because like you just don't get time to eat. People like, I think it's really funny when people think about touring that haven't experienced a real proper tour, because they always like ask you when you get home, like, oh, did you get to go sightseeing in this city, or like what was this place like? And I'm like, dude, you leave at 8 a.m, you get in the van, you drive for like maybe 6-7 hours, sometimes maybe a little more, maybe a little less. You get to the venue, you load in, you sound check, you maybe get to go eat something substantive, and then you play the show, you hang out, maybe you go to a bar and have a drink, and then you go to the hotel and you go to sleep, and then you get up and you do it again, unless you have a day off. And so you really don't see like the city, you don't see like the place that you're at, it's a very like single track, single-minded, very purposeful way of existing. It's kind of great in that way, because it's very easy. You know exactly what your day is going to be like. But Yeah, you have to like really enjoy the little things too, like because you do all this stuff that kind of sucks to get to that 1 hour of magic. Like being in a van for 8 hours
Traveling.
sucks.
Yeah.
Eating gas station food sucks. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, sleeping in hotels it's kind of the same every single night. We always stay in Holiday Inn Expresses because we like get rewards points, which like leverages the cost down. So it's like Groundhog Day though. You're like you see the same bed every night. But it's like a different hallway. It's like slightly the same, and you start like
Oh.
you're like where am I? Like I don't even know what day it is, what city we're in. Something like you're like it can get very repetitive.
Yeah.
So anyway, you got to find these like small things, and definitely candy is like one of those absolute pleasures. And I'm like, yep, I'm gonna have that today to treat myself.
I definitely
and
have a
not
sweet
feel
tooth.
bad about it
Yes.
at all.
Yeah, you could. I mean, yeah, can afford the calories in this case because like 1 or 2 meals, if that, like having
Right.
time for that. Dang.
Yeah, and when you're performing in such a physical way on stage, I mean, that's an hour every night of just total concentration and physicality and really exercise. I mean, a lot of the songs that we play, we'll finish them and I'm like out of breath, and I'm just like my heart rate's like through the roof, and I gotta like bring myself back
And
to
hold a
center.
tune.
Yeah. So it's a lot. So yeah, nobody's gonna worry about 300 or 400 calories of M&Ms.
Exactly. Treat yourself.
Yeah.
Get the peanut M&Ms.
Right.
And then one last thing to kind of like round things out is I would love to like hear your recommendations for some truly terrible horror films
Oh
that you
man,
love.
terrible horror films. Uh,
Or just
okay,
horror
so-
films, your favorite horror
yeah.
films.
I'll think of like bad, like campy, cheesy
Yeah.
stuff. So for sure, like Bad Taste is a go-to. That's like Peter Jackson, who did Lord of the Rings. That's one of his like first like major movies that he did.
think,
But it's
yeah.
like shoestring budget. It's like a bunch of New Zealand people that you could tell they probably just like put out a casting call and were like, hey, nobody's getting paid for this, but let's make a movie. It's a really great movie about these aliens invade New Zealand for some reason, and they are harvesting humans because I think brains, or at least some organ or something, is like a delicacy at this like fast food restaurant in space. So they
I
are
love
harvesting people, and yeah, and it's like it's kind of like the storyline doesn't really it's not very like well defined. You're always kind of like wondering what the hell is going on, but these
Not really
guys,
fleshed out. Okay.
right? These guys are like in the New Zealand military, maybe, or they're like at least in this like force of people that are like fighting these aliens or whatever. And it's just sort of this very gory, like very cheesy, campy movie about them fighting these aliens. And the aliens look like people; they're like wearing human suits, so it's just super ridiculous and over the top. That's a really good one. Let me think about like terrible. City of the Living Dead is one of my favorite like awful zombie movies. It's also kind of really fun. It's got like several different names. I think it's like called Gates of Hell or something, but City of the Living Dead is definitely like what it came out to American audiences as. It's this very, very, very cheesy Italian horror movie from the 80s about this. There's this plane coming from, I can't remember if it's like some scientific research center or some crazy thing, but the Italian military like loses contact with this like giant military aircraft, and it lands on this airstrip, and it's supposed to be like full of people, and so they sort of like surround it, and the doors open, and they've got no communication with them whatsoever. But then all these like zombies start pouring out of it, but they're like smart, and they're like people. It's hard to describe. They have like weapons and stuff, and they have like machine guns and shit. And but they're still like zombies, so they'll like shoot people, but then they'll like eat them. But they're also not really quite zombies. They're more like vampires. It's really weird, but it's super ridiculous, and it's like so funny and over the top, and it just is such a wild ride. But the music is really good, and it's really like a fun movie. So there's that. And then maybe like cheesy, terrible ones. Let me think. I've seen so many bad movies. Like I'm really bad at like listing things.
Me
when
too.
I'm like pressed. So I'm always like wondering.
No, yeah.
Like,
I mean, you've already said plenty, honestly.
Yeah. This is like one of honestly my favorite movies, but it's like maybe objectively kind of bad. Either Demons or Demons 2.
Okay.
Another Italian horror movie by a guy named Lamberto Bava. I love Italian like horror. Especially from the 70s and 80s. It was just so ridiculous and over the top. But these are actually pretty fun movies. Dario Argento produced these. So effectively, both Demons and Demons 2 are kind of the same movie. They're just a little different.
Okay.
Demons is a movie, so you should definitely start with Demons. But it's a movie about these. It kind of starts out in Berlin in the 80s, like when it was made. These two girls they get these tickets for this like premiere of this horror film at this theater. From this like mysterious mask wearing guy. He's kind of creepy, and he's like, "Come to the show. It's free. It's like a premiere." So these girls go to this theater, and there's this like huge retinue of like ridiculous characters. There's like this pimp who is his like prostitutes, and he's like very like, "Hey baby, hey, how's it going?" And it's like super over the top and just such a like stereotype. But they're like so funny.
That was a fantastic voice, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I've seen this movie a lot, so there's like this middle-aged couple, and then there's like all these teenage boys. It's just all these like very distinctive characters.
Yes.
So they're all at this movie, and the movie comes on, and it's about this sort of invasion of these demons. And earlier on in the movie, in the movie you're watching, one of the women nicks herself on this like relic that's in the theater for some reason. It doesn't really make any sense. And while the demons are coming onto the movie that they're watching in this theater, she turns into one. And basically, it's kind of like a zombie movie. She attacks people, and if you get scratched by them, you turn into a demon. And it's just super over the top. It's really, really gory and insane and ridiculous. And it has this like, the first one has a really like crazy like hair metal, 80s metal soundtrack. The second one, which is kind of the same thing, it's just in an apartment building, but same. Actually, the guy who plays the pimp, spoiler alert, he dies in the first one. He's just back in the second one, but as a different person.
I love that.
The same actor,
Fantastic.
the same like affect, the same character and mannerisms, but in the second one, he's a gym, like he's a personal trainer, and he's like, but it's the same movie basically, but it's just even more ridiculous.
Perfect.
And the second one has like a goth soundtrack, so it has like Bauhaus and like the Cult and like all like the Smiths. It's really ridiculous.
Very good.
So I highly, highly recommend watching either of those
Yes.
movies. It's so much fun. You can't go wrong either way, and you don't have to have seen Demons to see Demons 2. There's
Clearly.
no story to get in the way of the plot. Like it's just
Cool.
pure
entertainment
stuff happening.
and
Yeah,
silliness.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. My friends and I will do like a heckle fest where we like to watch a movie that's can't be silly and ridiculous and just kind of rip on it, but like also have a lot of fun, So.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, that sounds like my kind of time.
Yes. Yeah, especially with the like this guy, he's just back alive, but as a gym person or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
Cool.
And they're just like, no, they'll be fine with that. Like nobody,
totally.
that guy was great in the first one.
They didn't see the first one.
Yeah, or like who cares? It's Demons too. Let's go with it.
Maybe there's like some multiverse thing going on. Who knows?
I know. Yeah, there
All
is
the
like
theories.
There is some weird like interdimensional stuff that does happen in the movie, but it's not deep.
It's not fleshed
it's very
out.
like, it's very silly. So.
Gotcha. Oh, well, Dusty, this was such a pleasure. So much
Yeah.
fun. And yeah, thank you for taking the time out of your crazy schedule with touring and just like life. I mean,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's I love talking. I love talking, if you couldn't tell, just in general. But
don't we all?
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that.
Likewise.
Thanks anytime.
You could talk forever.
Yeah. Anytime. If you ever want me back on, just hit me up and we can do it again later down the road.
That would be amazing.
We will announce our West Coast run on May 22nd. It'll be the 22nd or 23rd, maybe. Yeah, I like talking about all this stuff because, again, these are things that I think a lot of people, especially younger people, that when they listen to something like this whole podcast, and I hope that people made it all the way to the end. But younger people, especially when they hear people talking about these things, whether it's goth music or horror or mental health or whatever, just things that are not in the mainstream. In the purview of mainstream of like quote unquote normal people, I think it just helps remember that there's so much like good stuff out there. There's so much to look forward to. There's so much stuff to be around for. Like I always like to say, there's all this beauty and fun and excitement and good things to be here for, but you have to be here for it. And it keeps me around. That's why I feel so like happy to do what I do, is like I'm always excited about the future and what's going on in my life now.
Yes.
But I remember, and I keep very conscious of the fact that I have to take care of myself and to keep track of my mental health and my physical health and all these things so that I can be around, because I want to be here 5, 10, 20 years from now to do all this cool stuff.
Exactly.
And to continue to remind other people that cool stuff exists and it's not all, dreary, awful things.
Even if those things that fascinate us happen to be, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, well said. It's, you got to find your curiosities, find your passions. Yes. Absolutely. That's what'll keep you going, man,
Hell yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Too Cool for School, the podcast. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. Thanks for sitting for a spell. Stay spooky, boils and ghouls, goblins and ghosts. Till next time. Light.